Back again.
Hi, Deborah.
Hi, Deborah.
Hello. I think I see everyone's here.
Is it pronounced that way, but it's spelled with the ending in I see.
I set up a fan now, so I should be better. Okay. This regular business meeting for June 22nd, 2021 of the Edmond School District Board of Directors is called to order. First, Dr. Balderas, would you please administer the land acknowledgement? And yours.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry about that. Feels like it's been a year and I still do that, so I apologize. We acknowledge the original inhabitants of this place, the Snohomish people and their successors, the Tulalip tribes, who since time immemorial have taken care of, hunted, fished, and gathered on these lands. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and we honor their sacred spiritual connection with the land and water. By acknowledging these homelands, we commit to working with tribal nations to further the education aims they have identified in our classrooms and our schools. Thank you, President Kilgore.
Thank you. And next we'll have our flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next, would someone like to make a motion to approve the agenda for tonight?
This is Ann, move to approve.
This is Karen, second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve tonight's agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll go ahead and call for a vote. All those in favor of approving tonight's agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The motion passes and the agenda is approved. Next, we have our school board minutes for the study session on June 1st, 2021, and then our business meeting on June 8th, 2021. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the study session on June 1st minutes and the business meeting on June 8th minutes.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes for June 1st and June 8th, 2021. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of approving the school board minutes for June 1st, 2021 and June 8th, 2021, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? And the motion passes and the minutes are approved. Next, we have our public comment section. The public comment item on the agenda is an opportunity for citizens to address the school board. Items brought forward during this portion of the agenda will not be acted upon by the board at this time. Questions may also be referred to the superintendent or staff for examination and later response. And because we've been in a pandemic and we're continuing to meet online, we have been accepting written comments. We don't have too many tonight, so I'll just go ahead and read them. I don't think we'll bump up against any time constraints. So our first comment comes from Melissa Peterson on the topic of therapy animals. I have recently learned that the Edmonds therapy animal policy has changed and now disallows all therapy animals in Edmonds, including registered therapy animals supporting an educational program. As a staff member who worked with a trained registered therapy dog in the past in several different Edmonds schools, learning of this change was extremely disappointing. I worked with my therapy dog, Ginger, supporting students who received speech and language therapy for almost 10 years in Edmonds. And now that the policy has changed, I'm unable to register a new dog to provide this support in the future. I do not understand why registered insured therapy animals have been banned by the safety officer in Edmonds. Because of the ADA, he was not able to ban service animals assisting a specific person who has a disability, but all other therapy animals have been prohibited. As an SLP who has provided animal assisted therapy to many students in the past, I can attest to the benefits of providing trained therapy animals to support student needs at school, especially now when our students' social and emotional needs are the most intense they have ever been. It would be extremely helpful for the board to allow registered therapy animals to provide therapeutic support within Edmonds School District programs. Thank you. Our next comment is from Aaron Holder on the topic of equity, reopening, data, and next year. As this school year comes to a close, if we truly want to feel proud of our work, it is important to reflect on concrete data that will help us know the actual impact of choices that we have made. In January, the district presented data from panorama surveys as evidence of student disconnection and deteriorating mental health. It was a central argument toward reopening schools at both a local and state level. End-of-year panorama data shows that while reopening did have a positive effect on connectedness, about a 10% increase if we view the data in the most favorable light, it was hardly a cure-all. 1 out of every 2 elementary students and 3 out of every 4 middle and high school students continue to feel disconnected in our schools. The district has spoken about equity and a desire to support our most vulnerable learners. However, demographic data around which families opted back into our buildings was only compiled by the district after the board asked for it, and the board only asked for it after I asked. When inequities were found, such as our lower number of Asian American and Pacific Islander students enrolled in hybrid, they were glossed over and dismissed. When principals were asked if they were using the data to identify students who were struggling and not in hybrid, the principals said that they had not tried to identify those students. This shows a worrying pattern. Demographics and data are used to push agendas, but never revisited to hold ourselves accountable. It shows the need for reflection and equity work at a district administration level beyond planning professional development for staff and hiring leaders with compelling track records. These issues existed before the pandemic, and the bulk of the work requires far more than just reopening schools. That is all we have done. If any of the concerns this year, from academic achievement to mental health, has been serious to the board or administration, then it is time to follow through on doing more than just reopening schools. Next school year cannot be a return to the old normal, or we will have failed our students and shown our true values. Our next comment comes from Sarah Thompson, and it's on reentry update. As a parent and teacher in our district, I'm very concerned about class sizes for the 2021 to 2022 school year. I'm hearing of classrooms at my younger son's school that are already at trigger, and this does not take new students who might enroll over the summer into account. The COVID-19 pandemic is not over, especially considering the fact that our elementary students are not yet old enough to be vaccinated. To overcrowd classrooms and have them even close to trigger when our students can't protect themselves medically does not help to assure their safety and health. Reducing class sizes should be a priority for our district, at the very least for next year. I want very much to send my youngest son back to school in person at our neighborhood school. But how can we feel safe doing that if there are 30+ students in his classroom, as has been the case in recent years at our school for grades 4 to 6? There are significant academic benefits to reducing class sizes as well that I ask you to consider. Everyone will be more successful this year, students and teachers, with reduced class sizes. Thank you for your time and consideration. And our final comment comes from Sharon Kulseth. When will the Edmond School Board resume in-person meetings? As the state is resuming normal, in quotes, activities, many people would like to see the board regular meeting procedure and discourse. And I could just go ahead and answer that we are resuming in September, I believe. The reason that we have continued to be online is because it takes a lot of staff and effort that go into our live meetings, and we didn't want to take any of those resources away from serving our kids at this time. So it's not ideal, but it was the best decision I think that we could make at the time. Moving on. Next, we have our consent agenda. Do I hear a motion?
This is Ann, move to approve.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'd like to ask for a roll call vote, please.
Director McMurray,
Aye.
Director Noble,
Aye.
Director Chase,
Aye.
Director Kadams,
Aye.
Director Kilgore,
Aye, and the motion passes and the consent agenda is approved. Next, we have our re-entry update, our first report of the evening. Dr. Balderas.
Thank you, President Kilgore. We start off again. This will be our last update until we reconvene in July. So just want to make sure the board, but we will be providing board members updates in a Friday memo as needed until we get to that time. But again, as we finish off the last week of school, first of all, very excited that that I can say that we actually have kids in school to have the last week in our brick and mortar. So next slide, please. Again, current status is stage 4, and we're going to complete our status in stage 4. Summer school is, again, I don't want to go ahead of the presentation, but you'll hear a little bit more about summer school here in a bit. Next slide, please. Want to just really thank each board member for your participation in our high school graduations. I know that we had 8 graduations beginning Thursday and ending Sunday evening. Very fortunate to have the weather that we did have at our graduations this year, and we had all the graduations at Edmond Woodway Stadium. Really thankful for our staff that helped with this. Really a shout out to Rich Pettick, our stadium individual who is in charge of setting this up, and Greg Schwab, who helped lead that effort. So again, overall, we had over, I think, 1,508 graduates across across the stage here this past week. And it's just a tribute to the resilience and the effort from both kids and staff to get everybody across the finish line during a very tough past 16 months. So just a great appreciation. Just want to share that out with folks. Next slide, please. Again, here are the graduates and the number that we had at every one of our schools. Again, and every one of them is very unique, and every one of them was very special to for the kids. So anywhere from our Scriber Lake to our Edmonds Heights, but also our voice program that we had on Thursday. I don't know, actually, was it Friday morning? Friday morning, I believe it was the voice program we had over at the Edmonds Woodway campus at the old Woodway campus. I take it that back. But again, very special, and again, just really appreciate all the kids as they walked across the stage. Next slide, please. Turn it over to Dana Geslin, our assistant superintendent, who will guide you through this.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Just a quick run through of some of the numbers that are current. So the Department of Health has been giving us some updates, and we anticipate that we're going to get more as the summer goes on. Some things are changing literally week by week. So of course, everyone, all students in the district will have the opportunity to attend in-person services 5 days a week. Currently, mask wearing is still required for schools. You may have heard some other things from L&I. We're staying with that for right now until we get further updates from Labor and Industries and DOH. They are coming together to get some different guidance. Social distancing, of course, still required. Recommendations of 3 feet when it's possible, 6 feet elsewhere to the greatest extent possible. Still an emphasis on traffic control paths, how people walk in, how they walk out, seating maps, cleaning, hand washing, all of the mitigating strategies that we have done during this whole pandemic are still required. Attestations for students and staff will end on Thursday. So all staff, all students have been doing attestations daily. And so that comes to a conclusion on Thursday. So that morning text that we get at about 4 a.m., we will not get that anymore. So that will conclude, but we will still continue, again, diligent mask wearing. And then we do expect Washington DOH and L&I guide more extensive guidelines for schools specifically at the end of July. Next slide. The Snohomish County picture, it's really improving. Scientists do expect a COVID spike perhaps in the fall, but for right now, it's really going very, very well. This is the lowest. We are at 69 per 100,000, and this is the lowest since last September. So that's really exciting news. The test rate, the positive test rate is down to 4.8%, and we only have 57 confirmed positive cases in Snohomish County last week, which is incredible. We're still doing our curative testing. When students or staff are symptomatic and would like to access a test, we're down. The positive test rates for those are right now less than 1%. And then our school trends across the state are down, and the Edmonds School District mirrors that as well. We're down significantly with only 1 to 4 cases per week in the last 4 weeks. And then remember back in the month of April and May, we were at 4 to 17 cases 1 week. So it's really exciting. Also, I think that we won't be continuing the curative testing. I have to confirm if we're going to be doing the curative testing all through summer school or not. So I will get that information to the board at the next meeting. And next slide. And I turn it over to Rob.
Good evening, board directors. Just a quick update about our summer learning. We're really excited. Things kick off 2 weeks from today for all 3 of our main programs. And just as a reminder, the dates on those, we'll run a program for our K-8 students from July 6th through August 5th, and our high school program, because of the need and wanting to create more opportunity for students, that'll run 1 week longer. So training begins next week. We're finalizing our staffing plans, and we'll have our teachers training virtually, but of course, since many of them will be teaching in a location they've never been, we'll have to do some in-person orientation as well. Next slide. This is an updated slide from our presentation 2 weeks ago, and all in all, we have about 3,000 students that will be accessing one of our summer learning programs, and that's pretty exciting. We continue to bump up against the staffing challenge, and as we've indicated in the past, our teaching staff understandably is exhausted, and we've really had to lean on our partners in human resources and through our various formal and informal networks to tap some other channels to get teachers in. But we're excited that we're getting close, and you know, like I said, almost 3,000 students. So that's pretty exciting. Of particular note, in terms of changes, we reported about 800 students accessing our K-8 in person. Those numbers have been revised upwards quite a bit. So we're closer to 1,000, which is not quite what we had in mind in terms of a target, but given our staffing challenges, that's about all we can handle. And then while our high school numbers have certainly increased, we do expect those to continue to increase. We have turned off enrollment on our district website, but students can still enroll in the program through their high school counselor. So just want to make sure that clarification is out there for anyone who's listening tonight. And that's it. So I don't have the next slide in front of me. So back to you, Dr. Balderas.
May I ask Dr. Baumgartner if there is for the summer school, have we had to turn any kids away? And how do we do that?
Well, the way that we gathered students for our K-8 program was through invitation. So we didn't invite anyone that we didn't have room for. And so that is not to say that we haven't had outreach from families asking why their student wasn't able to participate. There's been some examples where one sibling was invited, the other was not. And so our school-based teams have been really helpful in communicating with families and explaining how we arrived at those decisions. In terms of the online, we had such an overwhelming response. We did cut things off, again, around the staffing challenge, but this is more students than accessed last summer by a bit. And so we think we're about on point. Jimmy Nguyen, who's the assistant principal at Terrace Park, he's been managing that program and has been in communication with families. So we're mostly managing to meet those needs. And we have the capacity with our high school, and we're even willing to make some adjustments to the amount of time that students have to come in person so that we can accommodate more students accessing those programs. So at this point, we're not turning students away.
Thank you. It's incredible that your numbers, to me anyway. That's what, more than 10% of our students.
So for the fall, we, again, just want to recap what we're planning for the fall. We are going to be offering in-person learning full-time at our brick and mortars 5 days a week, as well as options for kids to be remote in the out year. So again, we are working towards that. We are in working conditions right now with our association. But again, just to reiterate to the public that we are planning on having full-time 5 day a week in person in our brick and mortars instruction, teaching and learning, as well as a remote option. I think that's it for our slides. Oh, here's one more. Sorry about that. And our intent form, again, we will have another opportunity for families to be able to select whether they want to change from remote to in-person. And that's going to be something that's going to be done the first week of August so we can get staffing done. So the quicker we can get this, and this is timely, so this is time sensitive, we need to really be able to get this done early so that we can get our staffing completed in a prompt manner for our schools in case there are any substantial changes. Next slide, Terrell. Are there any questions from the board regarding next year in terms of what?
No more slides, Dr. Balderas.
Thank you. Thank you, Sherelle. Are there any questions from the board in terms of what, anything that, from the update at all?
Dr. Balderas, I'm wondering what communication has gone to families so that they know that the dates that they're able to change their intent for the fall between these dates?
I'll ask our communications manager to be able to get on the call. If Harmony.
Yeah, I'm here. Hi. Yes, so Director Kadams, we sent out e-news today. And so our electronic Edmond School District news that goes out to all of our families and staff, and that reiterated those dates of August 2nd to August 6th. We really did want families to have a heads up that it's coming and to prepare, watch for your inboxes that way. And then we are working on the communication and making sure that it is translated in the top 3 languages for each of our schools. And we'll be working on that in July to finalize the opportunity for families to change. And we, we really want to make it clear because some families may decide to go fully remote who already chose in person or vice versa. So we just want to be ready for that. We want to give families the opportunity to change their mind, but also giving a heads up that we really have 1 week to do it. This information is so critical for our schools to plan that we really need this information. So we're doing, and we'll be putting it out on social media as well, reminding people throughout the summer as they zone off and hopefully enjoy some rest. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from our board?
Okay. Our next report is on the Foundation for Edmond School District, and we have Deborah Brandy, who is the executive director, is here to give us an update. Take it away.
We want to thank Deb for being here, and she has a PowerPoint that she's going to present to our board.
So if you can stop sharing, then I can share my screen. Okay. Well, we're going to do it slide by slide since it doesn't want to. Oh, there we go from the beginning. Okay, thank you so much for allowing me to be here tonight and to just give you an update on the foundation and the great work that we've been doing really in partnership with the school district for, well, not just the last 34 years, but especially the last year and a half with COVID and all of the work to, help support our families and our educators and our students. And so this is just a quick update on the work that we've been doing. You're probably very familiar with this, but just wanted to just say hey and just share some information about the foundation. So this slide is, I can't see the bottom of it because of oh good.
I can share my screen with the presentation.
Oh, can you? This is the total program investments we have just made since 2018 through 2021 in the district at over $4 million in just that 5-year period of time. I've been with the foundation 9 years. January will start my 10th year of service, and so the legend, I believe, and hopefully I'm going to say this correctly because I can't quite see everything with all of the little tiles, is that purple is academic enrichment, orange is academic enrichment, and green is health and wellness. And the numbers in 2021 are through April, so our fiscal year ends in June. So it looks like our numbers are down, but our numbers are up. They're fairly high as they have been, all year and for the last year and a half. So this is just a snapshot of just the last 5 years of the work that we've been doing. It is not 40. Who offered to share their screen? I can't
That was
get
me.
this to
Terrell.
forward.
All you have to do is stop sharing your screen, and it'll allow me to share mine.
Okay, sorry, I can't get the slides to move forward with my. So this is also just looking at the same data, just in a pie chart form. Just $1 million in academic enrichment, 1.2 million in career and college readiness, and then 1.9 million in health and wellness over the last 5 years. And then the next slide. And then just some ways that we've partnered with the district, and super thankful for the opportunity to bring some folks together to help with Victor's vision and the DEI team, Sally's team, everybody's vision around eHub. We got some donations in and some community partners that work to help design the space and select colors and build some of the little Seussical buildings that we see, and then the fencing that went up around the library, just to give it a nicer, warmer cafe feel. So it was fun to be part of that project. The next slide. And then scholarships. Scholarships continue to be a large part of our current college readiness programs. This year we awarded $138,000 in scholarships, 64 awards in total to, I think it was 58 students. Some students received multiple awards, mostly students in the athletic scholar program who might have been selected for other scholarship awards. This is Asia Donnelly, who received the Hazel Miller Memorial Scholarship multiple years in a row, and which allowed her to do study abroad programs. Got a wonderful letter today from Generous Ya, who graduated. I'm not sure what year he graduated, but he also received the Hazel Miller Memorial Scholarship, and just what a difference it made in his life. And so scholarships have just been announced and awarded, and super proud of that with our students who are graduating this week, last week and this week. And the next slide. Nursery Network is really where we're spending a large part of our time at the moment through various avenues. So next slide. Next slide. Maybe not. So in Nursery Network, we are still doing weekend meal kits. This is just a picture of last year, some pictures from last year. So when COVID hit and we all went into shutdown, and everybody was trying to figure out what does this look like, and getting meals to families. So really partnering with Megan's team on grab and go meals, and between spring meals and summer meals, and then into the fall, and continuing even through this summer and back into this next fall. The picture on the right is Schubert Ho and his team at Salt and Iron, who did dinner meals for our families who in the spring were receiving grab and go meals. This cute little girl in the middle is holding a Dick's cheeseburger. We had some donors who bought meals from Dick's Burgers that we were able to distribute. And then the picture on the left are actually the sea of boxes at Edmonds Woodway High School that were filled with grab and go breakfast and lunch meal kits, 7-day breakfast and lunch meal kits, and provided a host of volunteers for Megan's team to basically box up meals and send them out. We've next slide. We've been feeding fairly consistently at the peak 475 students a week. Before COVID, we used to deliver weekend meal kits to school students at school. So we were averaging about 28 of our 35 schools where we would deliver meals, and we were weekend meal kits, and we were serving about 211 homeless kids at the time. currently, the numbers have started to kind of inch down slightly, not significantly. We've gone down from 475 at its peak to 400 per week, and we're delivering to wherever our kids are sheltered. And these are kids and families that can't get to the grab and go meal sites, or they can't get to our pop-up pantries. They're medically fragile, or they're in a position where they just can't get there. This is a picture of our pop-up pantries. We, in working with Sally's team, expanded our pop-up pantries from 5 pantries to 7 pantries, and are serving about 300 families per month at our pop-up pantries. And over the summer, we're going to scale them back to 5 pop-up pantries from 7 to 5. And then when school resumes in the fall, we'll move back to 7. I think the reason for 5 is just to consolidate and move some families to other locations, just to make it, I think, just for ease of distribution. Maybe also to help with Sally's team, who I believe most of her team, they rotate over the summertime. They're not always there. So I think it makes it easier on Sally's team. And so this is just I think this is Alderwood Middle School, I believe, where grab and go meals are drive-through. So rather than coming in and shopping and picking up grocery staples for the family for the month, they drive through, pop the trunk, and we pop in Megan's 7-day breakfast and lunch meals, and then no, I'm sorry, I'm mistaken. This grab and go meals. So, or I mean pop-up pantry. So it's pre-boxed pantry foods, that larger bulk items that families take home with them. We partner with our food banks and some of our church partners to help with some of the food staples that go out to families at our pop-up pantries. We also partner with VOA. Next slide. And so at its height, we're also supplying like an extra can of food in each of Megan's grab and go breakfast and lunch meal kits. So in addition to the 7-day breakfast and lunches, we're adding a can of food, whether it's chili or soup or tuna or mac and cheese, just to have a hot item for our students to have over the weekends. And at its height, we were including 4,000 cans of food per week. And that number's dropped down to 2,000 per week. We expect that number to remain the same through the end of the summer. And then we'll revisit that with Megan in the fall. We expect that this will go away as families are coming back into school and they're having lunch in school. The families that are studying remotely, the students that are studying remotely, we'll meet to talk about that and how we'll serve those families. So we'll see how everything adjusts for the fall. And then next slide. Currently, there are over 33,000 food items go through our Nursery Network pantry every month to feed our students and our families, between weekend meal kits, pop-up pantries, food staples that go out through Megan's team through Nursery Network. And then next slide. And then Whole Families, Whole Communities. This is probably one of our lesser known programs, although it's 5 years old. We started this program, really it was a pilot project that we started with Scott Morrison and Justin Irish at College Place Elementary School, with some parents and their family resource advocate, to learn what do families need, how can we help family resource advocates in their jobs, because they work so hard every day. And piloted it there, kind of did a focus group and then piloted it, and then really launched it about 4 or 5 years ago, district-wide, with Sally's team and the DEI department and the family resource advocates and student support advocates. And the idea is bringing multiple community partners together to help the family resource advocates make their job easier, so they're not working as hard as they are working. I mean, they work very, very hard. And so our community partners include UW Bothell, Edmonds College, LETI, Latino Education Training Institute, VOA, we have some banking partners and some health and wellness partners. And I think back in February, Sally's team hosted a renters' rights panel and with VOA and some other partners. And then we followed that up with how do you budget through a crisis or emergency situations so that we can help some families, figure out how to budget. We're looking at, another renters' rights panel and what happens now that you have to pay your rent and when the rent moratorium or the eviction moratorium is lifted. And so we're looking at a series of seminars or webinars that we can do for our families in the fall, but it's really turned more toward helping families in emergency services, pay utility bills, medical bills, daycare, car payments, car repairs. We're not currently making rent payments or helping families with rent because VOA has like $15 million that have come into VOA through the county and the state to help families with rent supports. And so if we can get families connected to VOA or to LEDI who have buckets of funding for rent, then we can utilize our emergency services funding for other bills that hopefully then help to lessen the burden, the economic burden for our families. Ideally, the idea behind Whole Families, Whole Communities is to help families get connected to job training skills and job training programs so that if we can, and a career coach that we help fund through LEDI, that by working with the three, we can get families connected to job training skills, increase their earning capacities, and help them move up in a career ladder so that we're moving them out of generational or situational poverty. That's kind of taken a back seat toward more the emergency nature of the pandemic of just trying to get through and meeting families' basic needs. So hopefully in the next year or two, we can shift back to that more holistic approach to getting families connected to job training skills and moving them up in terms of earning capacity. So that's Whole Families, Whole Communities, mostly focused on tangible support for families who are in crisis. And next slide. Summer meals. So last year we didn't, up until last year, our summer meals programs have been like a mini summer camp. It's 3 hours. It includes healthy activity. This is staff from the Move 60 program 2 years ago in 2019. And then an educational component and then healthy meals. And last year it was just grab and go meals at would have been our summer meal sites. And this year we're doing a hybrid model where it's just the healthy activity and the grab and go meals provided by Megan's team. Hopefully next year, our plan next year is to have our summer meals programs back up and running so that they're free mini summer camps to our kids and our families so they can come play and eat and have fun. Next slide. At our summer meal site will be a Snow Isle library van. They've been a huge part of our summer meals program ever since we got it off the ground. They typically come on Mondays. Students can come and shop in the little mobile library and pick out some books to check out and take home and read. They don't have a library card, they can get a library card right there in the mobile van. Also in our summer meals program, we'll be working with Verdant on hopefully some vaccination clinics for families that would like to have that. And then Chick-fil-A does cookies for us every week. Each site rotates weekly who gets cookies that week, but they bring fresh baked chocolate chip cookies and the kids just love them. It's fantastic. So summer meals launch next week, Monday, run Monday through Thursday through the end of August. Next slide. And of course, the Back to School Resource Fair, again, working with Sally and her team on the Back to School Resource Fair. Last year, we were, the fiscal agent working with Sally on distributing 1,800 supply kits for students this year. The goal is 1,500 in total, and the foundation will be handling supplies for students in grades K through 6 this year. About 1,000 of the 1,500 school supply kits that we expect to distribute to students in August. Next slide. And looking ahead, again, working with Victor's team and I'm going to draw a blank on her name, some forgiveness there, but putting together the mentor program. We're not running the program. We don't have the capacity or the manpower or that's just not our skill set, but we have hosts and hosts and hosts of volunteers. So we're working to put together the volunteers to help with the mentor program that will launch this fall. So looking forward to that. And I think that's it. And we're working with Mara's team on vision screenings for students and have received their grant to do for students to receive eyewear, hardware, lenses. That program is going, and we'll continue that in the fall with a bigger vision for a vision program. We'll see how that rolls out and plays out next year. But basically, that's what we've been up to the last year and a half, and it really, truly has been a pleasure to be your partner for the last 34 years, but these last couple of years especially, it's been really amazing work together. Are there any questions I can answer?
No questions, Deb. This is Ann. Just the profound thank you to you and the work of the foundation. It's just a marvelous example of community support. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Deborah, this is Karen. I'm echoing Ann's appreciation for all the work you're doing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, this is Nancy. I also echo what they're saying, and it's incredible to see the growth that you've made in both the amount of funding that you have to use, but in the variety of services that you're providing across the board. It's very impressive and highly, highly appreciated in the district.
You're welcome. I do have a chart. If whoever's running the PowerPoint can pull up that chart, it's kind of a program flow chart to just show all of the different programs and how they flow together. It'd be great to share that with you so you can kind of have a visual for that, but you're welcome. You're very welcome. It's not in the PowerPoint, it's a separate attachment. The program's flow chart, there you go. If you have the capacity to make it bigger, that's great. So the foundation, in the work, and this was a couple years ago, we a joint study session work that we did that was led by OSTAR Consulting Group, kind of came up with 3 categories: academic enrichment, career and college readiness, and health and wellness. And so academic enrichment is in orange, and then career and college readiness is green, and then health and wellness is purple. And so these are all of the different programs under academic enrichment that we support, whether it's classroom and school-wide grants, reading programs with working with Page Ahead, where our students at College Place Elementary and Cedar Valley get students in grades K through 2 get to come and pick out scholastic books, and they're theirs to keep, and they take them home and get to read them over the summertime. And they're free to them. So we received a grant that helps to fund the books for those programs. And then working with EEA, what was the Dr. Seuss Read Across America. We're hopefully going to launch the Nation of Readers later, late spring, late March, early April. That will be a fundraiser for our libraries in the district. And then student matching programs. Hopefully we'll see our kids travel again to TSA competitions, robotics competitions, world champions for cheer, our Linwood Royals going to cheer, so we'll see about that. Music programs that we do in partnership with the Daybreaker Rotary Club and the Jazz Connection, working with Scott Barnes and his team. And then fiscal sponsor. So we're the fiscal sponsor for College Place Elementary School, and we're in the midst, and I don't think Dana knows this, so I need to circle back around with Dana and share this with her. Sorry, Dana. But working with the Title VI and Native American families and students to develop a fiscal sponsor agreement with them. They don't have a 501c3 PTA, PSO, but they want to fundraise for their program. So we're working with them to be their fiscal agent to make that possible for that program. And then career and college readiness, working primarily with Mark Madison and his team on career connected learning, stipend support for college and high school tuition, world language test fees. In the past, we worked with Rob on credit retrieval, summer credit retrieval. We're not involved in that this year, but will be available if it's needed, if we're needed next year or sometime in the future. And then the same with PSAT and ACT testing. And then the jobs fair, working with Mark's team on the jobs fair. And then Nursery Network, these are all of the different programs that we do under health and wellness with Nursery Network and Whole Families, Whole Communities. It's pretty broad and comprehensive. That program in itself. When we started Nursery Network 7 years ago, it was, with trepidation, because at that point, up till then, we were just pass-through organization. We would raise funds and then we would just write grants to the district. But our board recognized that if our kids are hungry and their basic needs aren't being met, then they're not going to be ready for school. And Monday morning or Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday or Friday, and we want our kids to be ready to learn. That's their role right now. That's their biggest job. And if we can help them to be as successful as possible, then everything else is possible for our kids. And so what started as maybe feeding 39 kids a week or 79 kids a week, to think that at our height this year, we were feeding 475 kids a week, and we were prepared to move up to 500 kids per week is pretty incredible. And then all of the different programs that have come as a result of that is pretty amazing. And so just flowchart for you, just to kind of have to take a look at of, just the way that everything kind of flows together and the work that we're doing.
Other comments or questions from the board? Well, thank you so much, Deb. This was really interesting, and I appreciate your service to the district.
You're
It's
welcome.
incredible.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Next, we have our transportation presentation. We've got a lot of reports tonight.
Thank you. And I do have our transportation director, Ben Mount, and Lydia, our CFO, that's going to be on the presentation. We'll start off with an overview of our transportation department for the board, and turn over to Ben.
Well, good evening, board. I really appreciate the opportunity to share about the good work we're doing in transportation. It's great to hear about the depth of the work happening with the foundation there. And transportation maybe is a bit similar, that under all of these areas, there are so many good things happening, and so many children and youth being affected by our work. So tonight, it's been since January of 2019 that I've been able to share some information with you. So it's been quite a period of time since then. This last year, transportation has supported all of our school opening phases, and that's been really great. So we're really looking forward to full-time in-person this fall. And I think as we're getting ready for that, we're having some transportation questions and things to talk about and prepare for here. So just want to go over an overview of the department, some of the work we do and how that's proportioned. Then I'll turn it over to Dr. Balderas to talk about next steps. So I want to talk about some brief statistics about transportation. I want to talk about some of the groups doing work in transportation. I want to give some detail about the service we provide. That's a little bit of detail. I want to talk a bit about our funding, routing, and our fleet. So let's go to the next slide. All right, so we transport, as of our last full count before the pandemic, 7,151 students reported to OSPI per day riding our buses. We had 190 school bus drivers and 144 school bus routes. We own 188 school buses, and we traveled about 1.9 million miles per year prior to the pandemic. We were budgeted to spend about $15.2 million. And that figure, of course, will be updated as we return to full-time in-person learning. I noted programs supported here, but I really should have said programs supported include, since there are a great many kinds of things throughout the district that transportation does support. We do extensive work in special education, general education, McKinney-Vento and foster transportation, after school programs, before school programs, and trips. And next slide. So we have a number of different groups that make up transportation. The largest group, of course, is our school bus drivers. We're down to 146, and we need at least 30 more by September 8th. So we are actively recruiting people. It is a fairly long training course at 120 hours, but we will take anyone from a position of having a regular driver's license, driving their personal vehicle, to being a school bus driver and working with children and youth. That takes more than 120 hours, and that gets all of the licenses required, from CDL with the Department of Licensing to your school bus driver's authorization. So we are really looking for people there and are excited to meet the new people that will come in. We have about 10 staff in our shop. They maintain our school buses and some of our other vehicles that the district owns. We have 2 positions in training and quite a number of school bus drivers who are helping in that program. We have 3 employees in routing and reporting. I'm sorry, the slide says 2, but we have 3 doing really important things to direct school bus drivers in their work. We've got 3 dispatchers, a transportation behavior coordinator focused on student conduct on buses and professionalism and training there district-wide. We have an office coordinator, and we have a director and a supervisor. So next slide. So break down a little bit the kinds of work we're doing here. We have 49 general education routes, and with those routes, we transport about 6,200 students every day. So overall, almost a third of our students are represented on this slide. In terms of driver hours, which is a good proxy for total resources, we put about 31% of transportation resources in our district into general education transportation. In special education, we have about 80 routes. We transport almost 1,000 students per day, and that routing accounts for about 57% of the resources that we're using in transportation. And that's individualized transportation. So that's transportation that's mandated by an individual education plan or a Section 504 plan that is connecting students who have disabilities with their programs and making sure that they have the accommodations they need on buses to access their education. And then finally, we have about 17 routes dedicated to McKinney-Vento and foster transportation. So this is federally mandated transportation. And if you are in a McKinney-Vento or foster status, we will transport you by yellow bus from anywhere in the Puget Sound and that greater area to your school of origin, so that you can remain in that educational program that's so important to you. At last state count, we were at about 291 students per day. But in terms of students actually on the rosters, we've been up over 400 or more. And McKinney-Vento and foster transportation accounts for about 11% of our total driver hours. So I want to talk about one thing just briefly. As I've been going through these slides today, I was thinking about how kind of dry the numbers are, but how behind all of these numbers there are people. So behind each of those routes that are listed here, there are school bus drivers who are working with our children and youth. every day. And behind each of those student numbers, there's students who are coming to school and going home on yellow buses and working with our staff members. So I was thinking about this. I wanted to share an email that I got this afternoon from a parent. This is a parent named Jen, has, I believe, 2 high school students and an elementary school student in the district. She says, hello, thank you so much for providing bus service. We had a year or two when the bus did not come to our neighborhood and I was packing up a newborn baby and 3 older kids each morning and afternoon. We are grateful. We are also so thankful for our bus driver, Jenny. My kids adore her. She is kind, fun, and the perfect way for my children to start their day. She greets each student and makes them feel important. She's had a really positive impact in their lives. She drove our route for a few years, and my youngest son was cheering this spring when she saw Jenny was there. Please pass along our sincerest thanks to all who make safe transportation possible in our district. So really wanted to bring all the numbers I've just shared there and the people that are behind them home for you as we look at these things. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so in addition to transportation to and from school, we usually run about 44,000 miles a year of field trip transportation. So that's trip transportation is part of the school day and is supporting a curricular program. We transport about 40,000 miles a year of extracurricular transportation. And we do about 51,000 miles of Move 60 and other grant-funded transportation in our district every year. Next slide. Okay, to step back away from some of the district numbers a little bit, we have transportation funding is an esoteric and complicated topic. It is quite important. Transportation is funded for transportation between home and school, and that's funded through a separate funding stream from other district funding. So funding levels are determined by what's called the STARS system, the Student Transportation Allocation and Reporting System. That system was implemented around 2011, and it replaced the old ridership allocation system. And STARS is an expected cost system. So it statistically compares districts to each other and determines up to what level district will receive funding. And that funding comes to the district in a separate stream for to from transportation that generally can't be used for other things. And costs incurred beyond the STARS expected costs have to be funded from other sources within the district. So transportation funding is really important as we're looking at how we use our district resources. So next slide. So routing, very generally, we use what's called a tiered routing system. So that means we stagger bell times so that the same buses and the same drivers can transport for multiple schools. So in our district, we transport high school students with the bell time starting at 7:20 in the morning, middle school and some elementary schools at 8, some more elementary schools at 8:40, and yet more elementary schools at 9:20. And then in the afternoon, we take those students home again in the order that we took them in. So that is our 4-tier system. Next slide. So we've had some interest communicated in changing bell times. So in 2016 to 17, following, I believe, work on strategic vision, the district convened a start times task force that considered bell time changes with a focus on moving the high school start time later. And ultimately, that task force did not recommend any bell times, but it did do quite a lot of work on background and other districts and those kinds of things. So as we're thinking about bell times, there's some work that was done at that time. We can go to the next slide. So one of the discussions, especially, as there's been some interest in what is best around bell times, we've looked at in a cursory way at some options here to kind of begin the discussion. So first, schools can be switched between tiers with little cost, as long as the same number of buses and drivers are needed in each tier. So as we've just started kind of polling other districts and seeing what work they're doing, we're seeing a number of districts that are switching high school and middle school. And that's bringing middle schools a little earlier and letting high schoolers come in a little later. With some complexities, that is definitely an option that could potentially be considered if that was something the district wanted to do. Next is we're looking at a fairly wide bell time spread between our high school time at 7:20 and then our last tier there. There can be interest in reducing tiers. And that action can come with a significant capital and annual costs. So in some very rough estimates and looking at that, move from 4 tiers to 3 tiers at Edmonds could cost about $4 million in capital costs and about $2.1 million in recurring annual costs that may not be funded through the transportation allocation from the state. And then if we went from our current 4-tier system down all the way to a 2-tier system, that could generate capital costs on the order of $12 million and then $6.4 million in annual costs that may not be funded through the state transportation allocation. So let's move on to the next slide and talk about our fleet. So we own 188 school buses. We are growing a bit each year. Later on the agenda, you'll see some quotes that will ask about for some new general education buses, as we're anticipating some growth in that area with Woodway Center and Spruce having to be temporarily located elsewhere in the district. So we own 48 minibuses. We own 61 conventional buses. Those are mostly smaller buses used for specialized services. And we own 79 large buses that are used generally in general education and on trips and other kinds of activities. Average age of our fleet is 7.9 years, and the fleet's currently in good condition. There is interest and a need in the future to move to electric school buses. So as we're looking forward, if we look out to 2030, if we do not replace buses before then, we'll have 76 gasoline or diesel school buses that will require replacement. And when you have a large number like that, that can be a really great opportunity to make a move to a different kind of fuel. So in this case, moving to electric buses. At current prices, and I would assume that battery prices will go down over the next number of years, the capital cost of that move would be about $30 million in buses and about $3 million in infrastructure. And that funding would require a funding source. Options are a capital levy or possibly some other source that has not yet been identified. And move to the next slide. So briefly, as we were putting this presentation together, we looked around at some other districts and their high school bell times. That information's provided to, once again, to kind of start a discussion here. And there's still some work to do there in understanding how those districts' overall systems work and making sure that the times that we know about are actually post-pandemic times when we all return to full-time in-person instruction. So with that information, I want to pass it back to Dr. Balderas. With the next slide here, as we think about areas of interest that the board has and questions that we need to consider as we look at next steps. So thank you, and Dr. Balderas.
Thanks, man, for that comprehensive report. I think what I wanted to do is just start the conversation regarding some of the areas of interest I've heard from board and community, including bell time changes, the swapping of high school times. The 7:30 start time is really early for kids, especially high school level and developmentally. We know that's not the best using brain research. Also heard the use of community transit, as well as expanding contracting choice programs in terms of what it could look like if we expand our bus fleet, our bus system, if we do continue to add additional programming to have more opportunities for kids to be able to move about the district. So some questions that we're looking at as we look to do a more comprehensive transportation study is, can we leverage partners to augment having, can we have, we can have fewer tiers, cost money, and really determine what that could look like, and can we again become more efficient in our cost. Should we, again, going back to the conversation that started the 2017 study, really the time study about the later start times, should we have one? Again, it's a few years later, revisiting that with community, with staff. Is there a way to augment our current student schedule to be able to provide more flexibility for kids, particularly at a high school level? The 0 or 7 periods, more of a high school model. It could be again a 0 or whatever, if it's a block schedule, to augment the end of the day, to have kids be able to do that. I believe in Mount Lake Terrace years ago, when it was over 2,000 kids, I think Mount Lake Terrace was over 2,000. I believe when Mr. Schwab was principal there, he just started, I believe they had a few tiers that went through this. So a few tiers of scheduling at that specific high school because of the amount of kids. And so just want to open up for board conversation as we start to begin digging a little bit deeper into possible movement of student schedules.
This is Ann. Thank you for the report, Ben. I was wondering, you talked about the financial cost of moving from 4 to 3 or 4 to 2 tiers. Can you tell me what how that compares for number of drivers? If you go from a 4 to a 2 tier system or a 4 to 3 tier system, how does that affect the number of drivers needed?
Yeah, so a 4-tier to a 3-tier system increases drivers by what I would consider a moderate number. It's a number that I believe over time, if we wanted to plan for that kind of expansion, you can plan to purchase the equipment and hire drivers and make that kind of expansion. There need to be detailed plans for that. As you start moving into looking at, going from 2 to 4 tiers, you really potentially start generating very, very large numbers of drivers required. Like we're at 144 routes right now. You could be over 200 as you move into a 2-tier system. So that kind of change would come with a potentially much more difficult kind of logistical plan to actually bring that into reality. When we're looking at 3 tiers, we're looking more, something more like, 144 drivers pre-pandemic toward 171 or something like that. That's a very significant change, but it's more within the scope of what we're doing now.
And does that move drivers from a full-time 40 hours per week status to a part-time status?
Yes. Yeah, it makes the job less attractive and recruiting more difficult.
I just had a quick question on that, changing from 4 tiers to 3. I understand the capital costs. Obviously, if you're transferring more kids in only 3 sections, you're going to have more kids per section and more buses. But why is there an operational cost? The student mileage that you're transporting, even though it's in 3 tiers instead of 4, should be about the same. So I would think that the operational cost would also be about the same.
Right. There's some costs in the shop as we're maintaining more buses. But the key increase in costs is in the number of school bus drivers. Every school bus driver comes with benefits, and there are fixed costs in those benefits, and there are fixed costs in hours. So hours don't redistribute evenly and they don't redistribute in small increments. So that tends to bring in an additional load on the system that has additional cost. And if the board wanted to direct us to put a finer point on that, that is certainly possible.
No, you answered my question. I didn't think about the benefits issue because it totally makes sense.
So thank you so much, Ben, for this wonderful report. I am curious too, Dr. Balderas, if we're going to be looking at the bell times again and all the implications, what planning would need to would be needed, and what time would be needed to start a plan for revisiting the bell times?
So I think that's a fall discussion with the board in terms of what steps we would need to take with our community. I know that it's a different group of kids sometimes that are in our schools now, but I know I have heard it numerous times in terms of what are some options that could be considered. For example, I know this year, because we're in COVID, we do have some elementary schools starting at 9:50, for example. Not that that's going to stay, it's going to go back to a little bit earlier time when the school year starts. But that same school I just mentioned is something that a few years back when we started having when we had these set bell times, I think it was promised to community, to them, that it would be revisited and there'll be some shifting to have some balance between schools. That way there's not always an early school and a late school, that there be maybe some revision to have some level of access to have that early time that's maybe more preferable for some families. So I think it would be a fall discussion, Director Chase, to look at what we can do, but also start the conversation this summer with an outside partner to be able to look at, how do we frame this up and what's needed. So that's a discussion I would like to have with the board possibly in August, September.
I have a question about the electric buses. Why would we push out the conversion? Why aren't we doing it now?
So an electric bus costs very approximately 3 times as much as a conventional fuel bus. So we are on the lower side of funding levels in our transportation vehicle fund. And right now, the way that works is the money coming in only replace what you have. So if you're replacing a diesel bus, the state only replaces a diesel bus. And so that jump to a more expensive bus is something that the district has to front fund. There's also that infrastructure that has to go in. And so that is something that is a quite significant project when we're talking about the number of buses we have. And it's our understanding, sort of as we're preliminarily looking at this, that there's significant economies of scale if we make a move much more at one time, rather than trying to build out small amounts of electrical infrastructure and small numbers of buses at a time. So we're growing right now, but we're not actually retiring a lot of vehicles. So it's really that retirement age for vehicles that really brings together the economies of scale with purchasing more equipment, building out more infrastructure, and potentially being able to capture, or maybe the best way to talk about it is to plot a path to actually find that funding to make that happen. Have I answered your question, Director Kilgore?
Yes, thank you.
Certainly.
It may be also that the Clean School Bus Act that's been introduced will give us some assistance.
Yes, and there is movement in policy and funding. When you could first buy an electric bus, the state, I don't believe, was depreciating that bus as an electric bus at the purchase price. That's changed, and that's huge. So that means that you front fund the change, but the state picks up most of the costs of replacement going forward. So I think as we see changes like that in the future, that will really enable us to make a move when we need to do that. And I really hope we're able to do that.
I wonder, I've often asked why, do we have any partnerships with community transit? And I wonder if you have some experience to share about any programs or partnerships that we have done with them to, and even ask them, sometimes I wonder, why don't we ask them for routes that go to our schools at certain times? Maybe we do that. So
yeah,
what is your
think
experience?
Yeah, I think our recent experience with transit, to the best of my knowledge, is we've been buying bus passes to meet very specific needs. And that there are a number of those out there that we've been meeting with transit passes. But I'm not aware of more strategic conversations with transit that might strategically address needs. I think the key thing that we would need to have conversations about that is really what issues are we facing as a district that we want to address either with yellow buses or with transit or with some kind of option. So I think some direction from the board there on what areas do we have concerns about, or potentially through the superintendent's office through a process there, what needs are we wanting to meet as a district, and then we can look at what options there are to meet those.
Yes, and I hope we have that conversation. I think in my thinking and my experience as a parent, often the need was around the flexibility to go, say, attend IB when you're not in the Edmonds Woodway service area, or to attend the STEM, or even after school programs, having kids over at Linwood High School or not Linwood, but Alderwood Middle School, I'm thinking, to take the activity bus and bring them back over across the highway, and all the kids that need to be dropped off along the way, my kids would get home an hour and a half later. And so we figured out an alternative. So that's something that I'm thinking, gosh, if we had a bus that went from that side of the highway to this one around those times, that would really solve some problems for our kids. So to increase the flexibility, and as we move forward and think more broadly about flexible offerings to our kids, to particularly our secondary kids, I think that's where we might really want to talk to our community transit partner and see if they'll help us.
A little bit of background on that. When I first got on the board, we were giving bus passes to most Edmonds Woodway students because they could use the buses. There was routes that worked for them. And it was a very popular program. And we continued it until community transit greatly increased the prices for student passes so that it significantly exceeded the cost of a yellow bus. And so, when they partnered with us and gave us a decent price for it, it was a really good solution for Edmonds Woodway. But they priced themselves out of the service for us, and that was probably around 2007.
Yeah, you're right, Gary. And the other issue was Edmonds Woodway, because of where the kids were at that time, was the only comprehensive high school that it really worked at. Otherwise, the other high schools, their student population were not on established community transit routes, and community transit was not willing to basically create routes to bus our kids. That's not their charter. So if it worked on what they already had, then they were fine to work with us. But otherwise, it didn't make sense for them for some of the other comprehensive high schools.
Well, I'm optimistic that we could have a new conversations given our new context. I know that community transit is looking into, micro transit and some different ways of busing around town. And So maybe the time is right with the light rail coming in and all the, maybe the time is right that they'll think more creatively about serving all their constituents, not just the ones who aren't, over 18, I guess. But yes, I would say, Dr. Balderas, that all of us at one time or another have expressed an interest in revisiting bell times, because we just know that our high school students would be better served if they could come in a little later. And potentially also looking at the late start elementary, is there any way we could ease that for our families? Although maybe it's not an issue. If we talk to families now, maybe it's no longer an issue. I'm not sure. I think bell times, the early start for high school, is still a persistent problem. Yeah, and again, as we go through these as we expand our choices for kids, it's going to require some creativity in transportation. So, any other comments or questions?
Well, I do know one of the issues of the late start time for the elementary. I've been told that some of them are unable to do field trips on yellow buses because their start time is so late that the buses can't get back in time to start their first high school run.
Yeah, Gary, we have had some good news there. We have been able to backfill potentially, clearly we provide a yellow bus if we can, but we also have some contracts with other carriers that we've been able to use. Clearly we want to provide yellow buses as a first choice, but we were able to open that up. I'd like to say a year ago, but it's really now 2 years ago with the pandemic. And I believe all of those requests were met from that time going forward. So I agree that that's hugely important for those schools and for their academic programs to be able to take those trips and be supported in that. So that's been really good.
Thank you for solving that problem.
Yeah, and the business office was a big part of that too. So I make sure I don't take credit for too much of that solution. But thank you.
So really want to thank Ben for the presentation and board for your questions. Just wanted to start this conversation now before we start summer so we can continue the conversation when we get back in the fall.
I was muted. I was saying, thank you very much for this presentation. It was illuminating. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ben.
Next, we have a presentation on the high school general chemistry and science adoption with Dr. Baumgartner.
Hi, good evening. Hopefully this report is as illuminating. Keep the momentum going. Just for our viewers and a reminder to our directors, typically we would have done this report during the first reading for this adoption process. And so that's a mix up and that I'll take responsibility for in terms of getting things to in time for the board packet, but we're glad you're able to accommodate. And I'm joined today by two great individuals, Kim Hunter, who is our secondary program director, and of Highly Capable and Secondary, and Jen Hageman, who is our secondary science lead. And she's been the key person in moving this process forward. We'll be sharing tonight our general chemistry and science materials adoption recommendation. And you may recall from a board study session that we held earlier this year, where we provided some background about the larger picture when it comes to the high school science adoption process. And so this is just one slice of the work that's happening at high school, and that's chemistry. And, you know, we've often been talking about the wisdom of doing significant work during a pandemic, but it's a true credit to the team that we've been able to move this forward in the ways that we have. And I'm really looking forward to the next steps. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Jennifer, and we'll remain for questions after the brief presentation. Thank you, Jennifer.
So this presentation is really an abbreviated overview of a process that has really taken almost 2.5 years to complete. So there is a rationale for the equitable distribution of the science equipment within our district, as well as the chemistry adoption process and recommendation that is outlined in detail in the submitted board report. There are 2 proposed recommendations. Next slide, please. So, of course, I would have technical difficulties. So the Edmonds School District last adopted high school science curriculum in 2005, which was 8 years after the release of the initial Washington State Science Learning Standards. Before the rollout of the modified 2009 Washington State K-12 science standards, there were extensive efforts that went underway to align the course materials to both the 2009 and the recently adopted 2013 Next Generation Science Standards. Although many steps were taken to ensure students' success and access to the standards through our curriculum framework development process that we created, that we have engaged with since then, the 2005 adopted resources are not aligned to either set of standards, which are the 2009 or 2013 standards. The current event topics are also very aged, and the science instructional practices have significantly evolved. Teachers have had to use department or even personal funds to provide students with engineering experiences in the classroom. Therefore, each building and classroom has varying levels of engagement in STEM, engineering, design, and technology. This has created inequity and institutional barriers for students across the district for many years, depending on how much time and resources are allocated by buildings for this purpose. Cheryl, if you can just click next so we can see the next infographic. So our adoption process began with a detailed needs assessment. All high school science teachers and a student focus group developed a prioritized needs assessment list, and the criteria was shared and voted upon. These are the 8 core priorities that were identified by both students and teachers. Next slide, please. After the initial screening and review of materials, it was determined that content-based subcommittees, so in this case, the chemistry teachers, would review and pilot curriculum materials as they are experts on that given content area and subject area. 7 full curricula were initially reviewed, and 5 were selected for a full detailed rubric analysis and review. Next slide, please. All materials were evaluated by both the Material Review Committee and the chemistry teachers. There are a total of 36 high school science teachers in Edmonds, 11 Material Review Committee members, 12 core chemistry content specialists, and 5 chemistry teachers who regularly participated in all committees and components of the process. The Material Review Committee members determined to utilize the rubric that was developed in our past adoption, so both our K-5 and middle school adoption processes, with some significant modifications. There was an abbreviated system and scoring procedure that was needed to be implemented in order to simplify the process of scoring, because there was too large of a threshold of criteria, as well as to elevate the importance of guaranteed and viable curriculum across the curriculum, equity of opportunity, and most importantly, what our teachers designated was culture responsive teaching. The overall maximum composite score was 160, with a minimum score of 140 as the threshold for piloting in our classrooms. Based on the rubric evaluations, McGraw-Hill's Inspire Science had a score of 143 across the content areas, and Living by Chemistry with a median score of 150. So it was determined by the Material Review Committee to move these into the piloting portion of the adoption process. After an in-depth pilot of the Inspire Science curriculum from September to November of 2019, it was determined by the Material Review Committee and the Pilot Committee that the units were not clearly aligned to the next generation science standards and contained very weak storylines that did not aid in student understanding and engagement. Next slide, please. A total of 4 teachers from 5 school sites expressed interest in piloting and were invited to participate in the pilot committee for the Living by Chemistry pilot. The pilot occurred from January 2020 to March 2020. The 175 students who participated in the pilot process completed 3 units. Depending upon which site, they participated in different units, and some were consistent across the site groups. The units were weather, which is an integrated physical science unit, toxicology, and alchemy. The student feedback deadline was March 15th of 2020. However, the piloting feedback and data collection process was of course cut short due to our emergency COVID closure. One chemistry teacher was able to engage in a long-term pilot of the curriculum materials from September 2020 and is still utilizing the curricular materials as of this week in the classroom with 65 of his students. The student feedback may be limited in number, but not necessarily in scope, and the Material Review Committee found it satisfactory in making a determination on the recommendation of this curriculum. So due to the close of the schools during the pandemic, only about 50 of 175 students were able to submit feedback on the curriculum. Next slide, please. You can go ahead and, oh yes. So 80% of students determined that this curriculum met their needs, their learning needs, and 100% indicated that it covered content relevant to them. So you can go ahead and click next. Overall, 92% of students indicated that they would like to see other teachers in the Edmonds School District utilize this curriculum in their chemistry classrooms. Next slide, please. In terms of parent and community feedback, with the closure of school, the momentum and communication about the process was definitely lost due to much more urgent and pressing needs. The curriculum review website was launched again in March of 2021, just prior to teachers and students pivoting into the classroom for hybrid simultaneous instruction. Now, despite the length of time and that the feedback form was publicized and available for review during the COVID closure and after, we really received minimal feedback. Feedback from parents and students did not allow us to draw very concrete conclusions with such a small sample size. But while feedback was minimal, the majority of parents were in 70% support of this recommendation. Parents and community members determined that the strength of the curriculum was to lie in 3 key areas. First was that the materials were an appropriate baseline knowledge for all students in chemistry. Second, that the curriculum is relevant to students' lives. And third, that the materials were organized to support student success and accommodations. Next. And this just shows the overall percentages of students or of parents and community feedback. Next slide, please. The teacher feedback indicated that the Living by Chemistry curriculum materials are an appropriate baseline knowledge for all students in chemistry, and that it's best suited for students in the general education chemistry setting, while providing access to students who may find chemistry a challenging subject area to master. So 9 teachers, a total of 90%, agreed that the curriculum would best suit the needs of our general chemistry students. 2 abstained but agreed to commit to the implementation process, but did not vote or participate in any aspect of the process. And 1 teacher, a total of 10%, disagreed. This will be discussed in the concerns and challenges section of this presentation, which is next. Next slide. For the concerns and challenges, the 1 teacher who disagreed, the 10%, felt that this curriculum would not suit the needs of the honors chemistry students to prepare them for the AP chemistry and college level STEM courses. The teacher did agree that this would be a better fit for the general education students' needs in general chemistry, but not as a curriculum intended for district-wide use in all courses, as there would need to be heavy supplementation for honors students. Our general chemistry course is really designed to meet the needs of all students and to address specific NGSS physical or chemistry standards. And our honors chemistry course is really considered a college preparatory course that covers the NGSS standards plus additional material. Many students who take honors chemistry also take AP or IB courses, such as AP or IB chemistry, and the honors course prepares students for rigorous and mathematical skills needed to be successful in many of these advanced level courses. The Material Review Committee member and a few chemistry teachers stated that some areas of chemistry lacked rigor and some specific content that is traditionally taught in these honors chemistry courses. However, we have to note that there is a difference in scope between what the colleges and university expectations are for students in honors chemistry and post-secondary preparation than what is outlined in the expectations of both the state and the next generation science content standards. The proposed solution to this challenge and concern is, one, the refinement of the curriculum frameworks to make extremely clear distinctions between the general chemistry and honors chemistry standards, topics, and content. Two, the development and acquisition of supplemental resources to address the science content and mathematical understanding gap between the general and honors courses. Next slide. So these 5 components were outlined as areas of strength of the Living by Chemistry curriculum that all teachers really agreed were helpful for students. Overall, the Living by Chemistry curriculum is aligned to our K-12 science vision. Our needs assessment identified core priorities and the instructional needs in an ever-changing classroom environment. These resources are all fully integratable into the Canvas learning management system, which provides teachers with additional tools to differentiate the chemistry curriculum and provide specific and prompt feedback on assessments. And teachers, again, identified these areas: the Canvas integration, the sapling learning system, which is kind of the interactive playground for students to interact with chemistry curriculum, the computerized adaptive testing and the assessment item banks that teachers can manipulate in order to create assessments for individual students, the assessment analytics that work with our Canvas and Skyward grading systems, as well as the engineering design tasks. So based on our evaluation of both the challenges expected and the feedback provided, all of the teams recommend adopting the Living by Chemistry science curriculum materials for the general chemistry course. Next slide, please. I'll go through this in brief. The implementation plan really is starting now. The goal is to have the physical distribution of materials to occur between, well, the end of the year and July to our teachers. But because this is a heavily digital curriculum that teachers can utilize to support students, all of that work occurs over the summer. And the learning modules are definitely pre-built into Canvas, so it's easy for teachers to translate them over. But that work occurs on our end over the summer. But teachers would have access to the digital tools as soon as we allow them to. So by the end of the week, teachers would be able to preview curricular materials and plan. I know they're not supposed to be planning over the summer, but I know my secondary teachers do, and they would be utilizing and looking at the curriculum as soon as possible to determine what changes they need to make in their scope and sequences. In terms of formal training aspects, we have a content area summer institute for secondary teachers in which chemistry teachers would be trained on the 2 parts of this recommendation. First, the chemistry for our 12 chemistry teachers and the probeware, which I'll speak to next. But that content area institute is August 23rd through 25th. And the goal is to have intensive days, either 2 or 4 half days, so teachers can sort of choose a menu of options to work through both the curriculum materials as well as the NGSS pedagogy strategies that are embedded and interwoven through over the course of 2 days. Next slide, please. So following the Edmonds School District science adoption process implemented from January 2019 to June 2021, the Instructional Materials Committee, Materials Review Committee, Pilot Committee, Student Learning Team, with the support of parents, families, community members, and students of the Edmonds School District, formally recommend adopting the Living by Chemistry textbook, as well as the instructional materials for high school chemistry. Implementation of this program would require the purchase of both the 8-year digital licenses of physical textbook materials and supporting teachers with the ongoing job-embedded professional development. So next is the next part of the recommendation. So next slide. So now we're talking about science materials, and this we're kind of zooming out. So instead of talking about just our chemistry teachers, we're talking about all of our high school science teachers. And there are about 35 of our science teachers. And so after a really detailed needs assessment across the district and within sites, teachers spent a lot of hours inventorying their science equipment. It was determined that buildings do not have the resources or physical materials in order to engage in the engineering and technology standards for NGSS, or to prepare students for post-secondary success in the STEM fields or in college courses. Scientific instruments, which we call probeware, and data collection software should be a part of a student's core experience. And it's imperative that the Edmonds School District provide some modern, future-ready technology and engineering instruments and tools in order to prepare our students for real-world success. So the tools needed for this endeavor include sensors and probeware, which are the tools that we use to collect information, the data analysis and visualization software, which is how students access the data, interpret and manipulate the data in order to see patterns, the interfaces and supplementary laboratory materials, all equitably distributed across school sites. And so for that part of the recommendation, next slide. So in order to provide equitable access to the next generation science standards and the engineering practices within them, the Instructional Materials Committee, secondary content teachers, material review committee, pilot committee, student learning team, with the support again of the parents, families, community members, and of course the students of the Edmonds School District, formally recommend the purchase of up-to-date science materials. Teachers will be supported with job-embedded professional development that will begin occurring in August of this year, continue through September, and again in January to prepare students for second semester preparation in laboratories. And that is all that I have for my recommendation information if you have questions.
So Jen, this is Nancy. First of all, I'm so excited that we're going to have up-to-date science materials, at least in chemistry, and that they'll be aligned to NGSS and be helping to get engineering design in there. I've worked with some consulting work with some science programs, and getting the engineering design piece in is probably one of the hardest pieces. So it's really exciting. I really have one simple question, and it might be embedded in the report, but I didn't see it. And that's, what is the cost of all of this?
The cost of all of this, I'll have to pull up the board report, but is around $235,000 for each of the components of the adoption. So recommendation 1 and 2. And I can go look for that in a moment to give you some specific numbers.
And then is some of that annual costs because it's a license, and or some of it is one-time costs?
The one-time cost that is associated with the equipment purchase. The annual license fee is less than $50 for us to continue site-based licenses per year. So in order for us to access kind of the data visualization software that is enabled on Chromebooks, it's a fairly minimal cost that really can be absorbed into kind of student learning budget. The other ongoing costs, there aren't any ongoing costs in terms of the chemistry adoption, just the renewal of the license after 8 years, or any add-ons that we have.
Dr. Kadam's Appendix 7 captures some of that. And it looks like the total cost for the materials with the digital licenses is $231,000. So that's an upfront cost. And then at this time, the estimate for the price of the probeware is $148,000. And this, of course, doesn't capture some of the ongoing costs associated with continual job embedded professional development.
Also, both these would have some annual consumable costs, right?
The annual consumable costs in terms of chemicals, is that what you're referring to? And so those are generally provided within both the departments as well as funded by student learning in general, but they're pretty minimal. So overall, we've really winnowed down the amount of chemical usage we have to less than $200 in terms of, because we're not maintaining large quantities of chemicals anymore, and most of them can be utilized across multiple labs.
I have a question about the honors experience. Is the current situation that honors supplements the current curriculum, or, you know, does this present something new, different from what they're already doing?
This does not present something new. So in general, we have about 640 general chemistry students and about 310 honors chemistry students. And we've traditionally, since the transition to the next generation science and standards, have supplemented honors chemistry to meet the different needs for post-secondary, and kind of those areas, there's really specific content standards. So we've been able to sort of categorize them and provide some units that focus on those standards. So it's not a new issue. This has been sort of an ongoing challenge with the difference between accessibility for science with all with next generation science standards, and then kind of our post-secondary expectations for students in STEM.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, sorry, just one little thing, because they mentioned rigor, that this is not, just to make clear, this is not a step down in rigor across our general chemistry, is it?
No, it is not a
Okay.
step down in rigor.
Okay.
Jen, can I ask you to, I should probably know this, but honors chemistry classes are different than AP and IB classes?
That is correct.
So are AP and IB classes taken care of in terms of having appropriate curriculum for them?
Yes, they have alternative funding for their curriculum, as well as different sets of standards and expectations. So they don't necessarily align to the needs of the next generation science standards. It's also it's one of our more unique courses. So both AP and IB chemistry require students to have taken chemistry before, and not all of our courses do. So they require you to really take a lot of detailed chemistry courses before enrolling in those. In terms of IB, you're required to take quite a few courses before you're able to take the chemistry courses. So there are some prerequisites as well as different materials.
And as background, we try to hold dollars in reserve because often the changes with IB and AP curriculum come pretty rapidly, and we're expected to implement those right away. So we build in budget through a different line item.
Any other questions or comments, board? Well, thank you very much. Interesting presentation, and I
Thank
too
you.
am always interested in updating our science curriculum.
And just as a reminder, when we do finish the high school science adoption, we'll have fully updated K-12 science materials. Of course, pandemic threw a wrench in our timeline a little bit, but the goal is still out there, and we're excited about that prospect.
Wonderful news.
Okay. Now moving on to unfinished business. Our first item is a second reading to adopt iReady math assessment system. Just a reminder that we have received a nice comprehensive report, and we had another meeting to have a first reading, and now we're on our second reading. Dr. Balderas, I think there was something you wanted to talk about here.
Yes, I'd like to make an amendment in terms of the recommendation that the board had received. I know staff have been working this spring on a couple of committees, and the recommendation for 21-22 is for us to continue with the kindergarten Acadience assessment for as a dyslexia screener and not iReady. So again, for 21-22, that we will continue to use Acadience as the dyslexia screener as required by OSPI. So for 21-22, I think that was something that spoke to staff last couple of days, and that's something that was not in the report. I think the report stated that iReady was the recommendation, and iReady is not the recommendation for kindergarten for the dyslexia screener.
Okay, would someone like to make a motion?
This is Ann, I move to approve.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to amend the adoption of iReady to include it, to change the dyslexia screener for kindergarten. It will not be iReady, it would be Acadience.
Yes.
Is there any discussion?
Can I inject just a clarification? The
Sure.
Acadience screener will actually be the dyslexia screener for kindergarten through second grade.
Okay, thank you. K through 2. Hearing no further
So-
discussion.
so,
Oh, go ahead.
I'm trying to understand protocol here. So are we voting on the amendment as phrased by Dr. Balderas? Because I'd like to propose another amendment to that revised recommendation.
Right. First, we'll do this amendment. And hopefully, that will pass, and then we'll do the next amendment. We're not voting on the entire amended approval until we step through our amendments.
Okay, so we're just
Okay.
voting on this amendment. Got it.
Right.
Thank
Okay.
you.
You're welcome. Any other discussion about this amendment? Hearing none, I'd like to call for a roll call vote. Please.
Director McMurray,
Aye.
Director Noble,
Aye.
Director Chase,
Aye.
Director Kadams,
Aye.
Director Kilgore,
Aye. And the amendment passes. That is, we are not expecting iReady to be the dyslexia screener for K through 2. Now, Dr. Kadams, we are open for other amendments.
Okay, I'd like to propose another amendment, and I'm gonna read my proposed amendment. I'm gonna read the recommendation with my proposed changes. But it's based on the revised version. So for iReady Math, support the advancement and growth of a data-informed school district culture and require the use of iReady Math diagnostic and online instruction in grades 1 through 8, and require the use of the iReady Math diagnostic in grade 9. For iReady Reading, continue to support the use of the iReady Reading diagnostic and online instruction in grades K through 8, and maintain the current optional status in grades K through 8 in order to collect more data to inform a longer-term recommendation moving forward. And so what I'm proposing, just to be clear, is that for math, kindergarten would not be required, but it would be optional. It would be available to anyone who wanted to use it. And in the reading, it's what basically just fixing what had been said to reflect what we just approved, which is that it would remain optional in grades K through 8 for reading, because we don't need to require it in K2 because it won't be used for the dyslexia screen. And I'd like to just give some quick background as to why
Before we do that, because I think that
Yeah.
would be part of the discussion, I just
Okay.
want to clarify, maybe I'm not sure yet that I understand the difference between what is on the table and I understand the reading, I think. I'm not sure. Yeah, maybe Dr. Baumgartner would also contribute to this conversation to make sure that we all understand what the amendment, how it's different from what were the original, the amended original, I guess is what to say. Does that make sense?
Sure. It might be helpful if we pull up the recommendation as it was proposed initially, just as a visual. So
It's page 2.
in the report.
Yeah, of the board presentation, May 25th.
Thank you, Director McMurray. Sherelle, are we able to get that up? And that's page
Slide
2.
number 2. Slide
Yeah,
number
page,
2.
yeah, page 2.
Slide.
There we go. All right. And if we could get it a little larger. Thank you. Perfect. Next slide.
So Director Kadams, I believe you were just striking, replacing in the first sentence K with first grade, right? With 1.
That's correct. That's the only change there, is that it just would say in grades 1 through 8 and everything else the same.
Is there any change to the reading paragraph?
So the only change that I'm suggesting in the reading is to change it where it says, and maintain the current optional status. Here it says in grades 3 through 8. I'm suggesting it say in grades K through 8. And then the sentence at the end of that, it is recommended to require use of iReady, blah, blah, in K2 was stricken as part of Dr. Balderis's amendment. So
I would be happy. I would be happy to second that amendment if we need that for a further discussion.
That's what I was hoping for. Thank you. Okay, now discussion, and Dr. Kadams. Explain.
Okay, so, I've expressed my concerns about the use of iReady in kindergarten during last year's discussions, as well as during the discussions on this topic in the 2 most recent board meetings that we've had. I've heard from numerous kindergarten teachers and parents who've expressed similar concerns based on their observing children randomly clicking on answers, which in turn elongates the frustrating length of the testing time because the test is computer adaptive. And what that means is that the system gives you harder items when you get an item right and easier items when you get an item wrong. But if you're clicking randomly because you don't know what the right answer is, 33% of the time when there are 3 choices, you're going to get the right answer, not because you know it, but just randomly. And the system will then have difficulty zeroing in on what you actually know and don't know. So in addition to hearing from numerous teachers and parents, I actually have many years of experience in the area of early childhood assessment. Each of us on the board brings our own skills and expertise, and I look to my fellow board members in the areas in which they have extensive knowledge and experience. And as part of this, it concerns me that the company that's developed iReady cannot produce data to support the validity and reliability of this assessment in grades K2 for math. And furthermore, when district staff have referred to the test as being tactile, meaning that would be like good for young kids, and saying that because it's taken on a touch screen by our kindergartners, I really feel compelled to point out that in early childhood, that's not what's meant by tactile. Tactile refers to the use of manipulatives, 3D objects, and not images on a screen. So when we want to know if a young student knows, for example, what a square is, we put a pile of shapes in front of them and we ask them to give us a square, rather than asking them to touch the box on the screen that has the square. And frankly, if a child knows what a square is, but struggles with, let's say, differentiating foreground and background, they might point to any of the shapes when asked to point to a square because all the shapes are placed in a four-sided box on the screen. So it can be very, very confusing with all of the different pieces and parts on screen when you just want to find out what a little child knows. I understand the goal to have a consistent diagnostic assessment system district-wide. But just as we differentiate instruction for students in our classrooms, I think we should also think about whether district-wide programs should sometimes be differentiated as well. In this case, all our kindergarten teachers already give a very age-appropriate assessment called WA-KIDS that assesses in several areas, including math and literacy. All our kindergarten teachers are trained in depth on this assessment, and they currently are required to give it to all kindergarten students in the fall. Good instructional practice would have teachers giving the assessment in the winter and spring to students who are not at kindergarten ready level in the fall. And there has been interest, I understand, in the district to revise the kindergarten report card to be aligned with WA-KIDS. And therefore, if we keep the focus on this assessment rather than adding another one, it would help move the district in that direction as well to align the kindergarten program and report card and assessment to the WA-KIDS standards. So it's for these reasons and more that I really think the iReady assessment system should not be required at the kindergarten level, but just be made available to those who choose to use it. Thank you.
Is there
This
other
is-
discussion? Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead.
this is Ann. So I guess this is a question for Rob. What would be the consequences to the system to continue the use of the WA-KIDS assessment in kindergarten and then switch to iReady in the first grade?
I wouldn't overstate that there's a significant consequence. You know, there are advantages, of course, of placing students on the same, you know, continuum sort of measurements of growth. But I don't think there's a significant consequence when we're talking about, you know, the assessment experience for a 5- and 6-year-old, and then what's valuable to, you know, a first grade teacher, for example. So, you know, I don't think there's a large impact there. You know, I do have concerns about systems alignment. You know, we bring that forward, and I appreciate that you know, Dr. Kadam stated that in her rationale, that really was the charge, that this is about systems alignment, and that the variability we have, not only in the tools that we use, but the ways that we use them, is a contributing factor to some of the outcomes that we have seen over time. And so, you know, that's a large part of, you know, our interest as a team, is so that we can have those apples to apples comparisons. But there are some potential things that I think we should consider, and one of them is actually related to the proposal for how we're going to look at the iReady screener moving forward, and that's for the dyslexia screener. So sorry, misspoke there a bit. The proposal from the committee that analyzed that work was that since they weren't able to adequately assess the components of the iReady dyslexia screener in comparison with the Acadian screener, that we want to have the ability to do that next year. And so, you know, it's more related to the second part of the recommendation. Just want to put out there that one of the challenges we'll face is, you know, we do need to get teachers so that we can, when we make that ongoing recommendation, because we weren't able to do the process in the ways that we wanted this year for the dyslexia screener, next year, we do need to get teachers on board that would be willing to pilot both so that we can do the most optimal assessment for that dyslexia screener. So that's kind of an aside that's there as well. So, but to answer your question, Director McMurray, while it's a challenge in terms of that, you know, K-8 systems alignment, I'm not gonna make a statement that it is just not true, that there would be a bigger impact. That is not something that we couldn't work around and make whatever data we present to families through kindergarten, and then to first grade teachers and families meaningful.
Thank you.
And
So,
I'd like to clarify something. You sort of implied in your question that it's a choice between WA Kids and iReady, but WA Kids is required by the state in the fall. So it's going to be given by teachers. It's very time consuming to give. It's embedded in the instructional program. So it's not time consuming from the kids' perspective, but for the teachers, it's, I think, Rob, in the first month that they're given, because they're recording observations of kids in authentic learning centers and authentic learning tasks. And so it's happening no matter what. It's required by the state for all of our full day kindergarten programs.
That's correct. I think when we do look at requiring the use of the WA Kids assessment for select students, even select objectives on the assessment that are more in line with what we continue to report on throughout the year in kindergarten, there are workload implications. And there's quite a lot that our teachers have to do to be ready to administer the assessment. There's an inter-rater reliability exam they have to pass, and they have to do some training. They all do that, and so they're ready to go. But in terms of administering that more than once a year, we could face some challenges without a thorough process about getting more teachers on board with that. We had two teachers that made two kindergarten teachers that made board comments, and I reached out to them and met with them along with Darcy Becker, who is our early learning program manager. And she, I think I had spoken before that she had initiated a process of looking at the kindergarten report card and piloting a project to replace the kindergarten report card with administering the WA Kids assessment 3 times a year. And what surfaced in that conversation was that there was a significant divide. There are a number of teachers who think that that's the right way to go, but there's also a number of teachers that have not fully embraced the WA Kids assessment, not from a value standpoint, but from a workload standpoint. And this goes way back, but when this was one of the expectations of getting full day kindergarten, was that we would administer that assessment. And there was a ramp up. I mean, we didn't just flip a switch. But there are still teachers in the system for whom this feels like something that was foisted on them and haven't necessarily embraced it. So there would be work to do in just getting everybody in our K team on board with changing the way that we go about administering that assessment.
well, I'm really confused now. I apologize, but so what I'm hearing is that in order to use WA Kids in place of the iReady at kindergarten, the WA Kids would need to be given to kids multiple times during the year, as opposed to, I'm assuming now the WA Kids is given once within the first month of the school, but that in order to use it in a comparative way with the iReady assessment, the WA Kids would have to be given multiple times over the year?
Well, that's something that we would be exploring as an option. Am I correct that that's your amendment, Dr. Kadams?
I'm not putting in your solution in the minute. I think it's up to you guys to figure out how, what you would need to do in kindergarten instead. I put it in my comments as an example of a strategy, but that's not what I put in the amendment itself. I just simply said, don't make it required. Don't make iReady required at kindergarten for math or reading. And so, but I'm not saying what to do instead, because I don't think that's my role.
I have
And
I don't know.
I'm sorry, I didn't
Oh,
think
go
I
ahead.
answered Ann's question. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Could you restate your question, Director McMurray?
I'm trying to determine if you're talking about that there's a workload issue. If WAC kids needed to be administered multiple times a year in order to make it commensurate with the iReady kindergarten assessment and online instruction. And that's what I was checking to see. So is it your understanding that in order for WA kids to be commensurate with the iReady program for kindergarten, that the WA kids would need to be administered multiple times a year?
Well, yes, and here's why. So one of the advantages of the iReady diagnostic is that, you know, in kindergarten, the students would first take it in the winter testing window, and they would take it again in the spring. So we'd have 2 data points for students there. We cannot administer, just by regulation, any other major assessments to kindergartners at the beginning of the year in the WA Kids window. So we would not be asking kindergartners to engage with iReady until after the winter holiday. And there would be other assessments that would fall into that bucket too. One of them is the dyslexia screener. For kindergartners, we wouldn't administer that at the beginning of the year. So if we were to administer the WA Kids assessment 3 times a year, we would have three data points over the course of the year that could show growth in whatever objectives we identified. There are 36 or 38 objectives in the WA Kids assessment. Brandon has more working knowledge of that than I do. And, you know, we could determine which ones we wanted to report on multiple times a year. So the value of having that sort of that benchmark idea assessment where it's administered, where you could track growth over time and report to students and families their progress over time, the idea would be to administer that more than 1 time per year.
Rob, could you clarify something for me? When I worked in the district, the kindergarten teachers were asked to do a winter and spring WA Kids assessment on 3 to 5 kids in their classroom that they picked as having the most areas in which they had not met kindergarten readiness in the fall. Is that a practice that got dropped?
I'll have to defer to Brandon. That's not in my understanding of what's taking place now.
Yeah, I believe it got dropped from the memorandum of understanding about 3 years ago.
I do know that teachers, because we did a workshop for those teachers in the winter and the spring, to look, as well as in the fall, to look at their data. And at that time, the teachers really felt that it was of value and appreciated the workshop time we provided for them, and the discussion about that they did with their colleagues about what they were doing in terms of interventions to meet those kids' needs and sharing strategies. So that's unfortunate that got dropped, because teachers did find it useful, and it helped them really track the kids who were the neediest.
Rob, this is Ann again. So can you give me you're talking about a specific workload issue if WA Kids were to be used in lieu of iReady. Right now it would be WA Kids for everybody in the fall, and then with iReady, it would be iReady in winter and spring, or it would be WA Kids fall, winter, and spring. How long does it take to administer the walk kids in the fall, and would the time that it takes to administer walk kids in the winter and the spring be around the same amount of time? I'm trying to figure out what the teachers are saying as far as a workload issue. What's the difference between administering walk kids in winter and spring or doing an iReady assessment?
Sure. And Brandon, you can fill in any gaps I have here. So understand that I don't have a lot of evidence other than, that conversation and the fact that we do have a significant MOU around this, that workload would be a concern. So we do need, if this is the direction we go, we will need to bring teachers together, really understand the challenges and develop plans for working through that. But so the beginning of the year assessment is going to take much longer because teachers have to establish baseline. They have to get to know their kids and those kinds of things. They're going to know their learners so much more in the winter that it will be a much quicker assessment, but it is still an individual assessment that they have to, and it's an observational assessment. So they're, creating tasks for students or watching students, how they engage with an interpersonal problem or those kinds of things, collecting evidence along the way. And so I think it's safe to say it's significantly less time in the winter and spring than it would be in the fall. But it still is an individual assessment. The other thing that I would add that's workload related is entering the data into the system. And so in the fall, we have to do that for reporting purposes. But if we really wanted to be able to analyze the data and report it out in valuable ways, we would want those data inputted into the system at the other times of the year. So there are definitely workload considerations. From a systems perspective, we do have language in the teacher's contract that anytime there's an individual assessment that's administered, the school needs to provide support for that to happen. So that could be with a substitute, could come in and cover the class, or a paraeducator could be assigned to help facilitate that. My understanding is that the kindergarten teachers are well-versed in using the paraeducators that are assigned to their classroom already to help with that. But in terms of impacts on the system, that's something else that's out there. But those would be concerns about moving that forward that we would just have to have a plan to address. Compare that with iReady, just the way that they recommend with the kindergarten is that you start working with the students in the fall, getting them familiar with the interface by playing games and those kinds of things. But the assessment, it's an individual assessment, but we're talking about 5 and 6 year olds taking an online individual assessment. So it would require some, instructional time and class time to make that happen. In terms of the impact on the teacher's actual added workload, I think there's an argument that it would be less. I'm sorry, Gary, I think I interrupted you.
No, I interrupted you. I thought you were finished. I was looking at the data. I couldn't find the chart, but as I recall, when you polled teachers, kindergarten teachers on this, there was a significant number of kindergarten teachers that were not in favor of it, but also there was a significant number of kindergarten teachers that were in favor of it, and actually slightly more teachers were in favor of it at the kindergarten level than teachers that were not in favor of it. Is that my recollection correct or not?
I'll defer to Brandon. I think so, but
yes, yeah, you're correct, Director Noble. It was split fairly evenly, but it was slightly higher for kindergarten teachers that were in favor.
I remember looking at the data, and I can't remember if it was question 12 or the one that talked about it, if the teachers felt like it was valuable for their, instructional information for their kids. From what I'm remembering, it was about 40% kind of on the positive, very positive side, 30% on the negative, very negative side, and about 30% neutral. So it was slightly, it was kind of a 4-3 if you looked at the positive to the negative, and then there were about 30% that really were just, they were just neutral, and they really, and so if you kind of dismiss the neutral people and just look at the kind of the extremes, it was kind of a 40-30 on its value instructionally, I guess, as far as the kindergarten teachers were concerned.
Right.
And-
So,
oh, sorry.
So with that's what I recall it being also. So Nancy, you said that you had talked to many kindergarten teachers and parents that had found the assessment did not work very well for them. Have you talked with many of the teachers that were in favor of it to find out how they were able to mitigate the problems that you described of a kindergartner taking this test on a Chromebook? Because if 40% of them were in favor of it, then they must have methods to mitigate the issues that you were describing. Did you talk to any of the positive teachers to see why they like it?
So Gary, you need to understand, I don't know who those teachers are. That was all anonymous data. So I wouldn't have been able to find teachers. But these are all people who approached me. I didn't approach anybody. Or I'd be like volunteering with a kindergarten teacher and she would start talking to me about it. I didn't reach out to people, they reached out to me. But I didn't go seeking either side. This was just people seeking me out because they know me, or they had heard that I had expressed concerns and they were thanking me and saying, what I was saying resonated with them.
So Nancy, just to clarify, the people that sought you out, there were no individuals that sought you out to tell you how much they liked it. The only people that sought you out were those who had concerns about it.
That's true.
And so just to reiterate, we're still just discussing, this is a wonderful conversation. And I do appreciate all the staff work and the board director's work on that very lengthy report that we had. And, addressing that the whole reason we're talking about this is that we had math achievement that was below expectations for over a decade. And what we're talking about is making iReady available K-8, just not required in kindergarten, correct? And then we've heard that.
That's right. And making it available. So for those kindergarten teachers who liked it or found it valuable, we'll have it available to them. But for those who really want to work in a more authentic setting, which is what WA Kids is, and learning centers and gathering data, in a much more formative and age appropriate way for kindergarten, they wouldn't be having to also sit their kids at a computer and watching them potentially, particularly the kids who come from low income homes who haven't interacted with technology that much, or kids who might have the skills but have some other struggles that are going on. Kindergarten is come on, these are little kids. I watched that video again today of training them, and I got confused about, and when you're here, click this, and if you want the base 10 blocks, click here, and I'm like, what? And so just animating it and making it look fun isn't really what little kids need. And to be very honest, I don't think it's great in grades 1 or 2 either. And I noticed that on several of the questions of the teacher survey, particularly the first grade teachers rated it. There were more teachers who didn't find it useful, more on line with kindergarten. But because I don't know of anything that's a consistent assessment going on for in math for 1 and 2. I'm just staying away from that, saying that, let's go with iReady. For reading, to be honest, K1 and 2 teachers like running records. That's how they know how kids are doing. They give a lot of reading assessments that are part of the curriculum adoption. But that being said, that was already going to be optional, so there's no reason to require it. I just want teachers to have the best tools possible. And to be honest, it would be good to work on assessment literacy in the district as a professional development initiative across the board, because a lot of teachers come from pre-service programs that don't even have assessment courses. And so for some, looking at a score, they may not bring the same evaluation of what it means, although there were a number of teachers who said it was outside of what they saw in the classroom, that it didn't coincide. But anyway, that went on and on, sorry. Bottom line is, yeah, all I'm suggesting here is to make it optional at kindergarten, make it available to kindergarten teachers who want to use it, but optional for those who want to focus on getting information about their kids in other ways.
Oh,
So I wonder if I could make a comment. First, I wanted to ask Brandon, if I guess I didn't understand is it that we lack findings about the validity of iReady in K through 2, or we found that it wasn't valid? What are the findings that
So
we have?
the validity and reliability data that we utilized for the evaluation and the report was provided by the American Institutes of Research. And that organization, they did validity and reliability for grades K through 2 for the reading iReady, but for some reason only reported their data beginning at grade 3 for the math iReady. And so I've been trying to contact somebody at AIR who is familiar with whatever branch of that agency has been working on that research, and haven't been able to get a reply yet to find out why they aren't reporting K through 2 math data for iReady.
So if we don't have any evidence so that really kind of tells me my answer. If we don't have any evidence that it's valid, I do have a problem using it, I guess. But if we had anything, I would want to also tell say to my colleagues that there is a value to having something. Now, if the district decided to go to WAKIDS more than once during the year to show growth, it sounds like, it sounds like that's not really happening for all students at this time. That WAKIDS is being offered in the fall, but not necessarily in the spring. I guess what I'm asking is I see that there would be value to seeing growth in mathematics across the board in every student, and being able to measure that using some kind of assessment. And if WAKIDS doesn't seem to be the one that we're using across the board for every student in kindergarten, to show growth, we use it for everyone in the fall, but we don't have anything that that shows growth in a systematic way, a comparative way across the school district. So not in a way, and I guess Rob mentioned sort of a way to meaningfully report across, disaggregated along the lines of race and ethnicity, along the lines of the programs that, free and reduced lunch or EL. It sounds to me like we don't have a way to look at that in kindergarten. And iReady to me was potentially a way that we could do that. Because it sounds to me like, at least currently, that's not what we're able, currently, we don't have that for across the board with WA Kids or anything else. And I did mention in a previous meeting, wouldn't it be nice if we were able to do a validity study by seeing, some kind of correlation between how the kids do in WA Kids versus iReady in kindergarten, to see if there was a way, if we could do our own validity study. Yeah, if so I'm sort of torn. I mean, if I don't have anything that tells me that this is reliable.
We do have, may I make a small
Sure.
short comment on the reliability and validity of iReady? It's absolutely correct that we don't have statistical evidence of the reliability and validity of the items, and that students' answers provide that validity and reliability. But we do have some information in the most recent board briefing, or maybe it was the second most recent board briefing. An update was provided where we were able to contact 4 school districts in Washington that have been utilizing iReady in kindergarten, in math, and reading in some cases. And all 4 school districts reported that they didn't find any problems that were unique or specific to kindergarten, with the one possible exception being that if there wasn't at least 2 adults in the room to help with logging in, that sometimes getting all the students logged in took more time than what was planned for. And then also we do have some evidence in our most recent end of year iReady report, and I honestly can't remember if we've had the opportunity to provide that to the board yet. But there is, so we do have the growth data in kindergarten and all the other grade levels looking at winter to spring. And like we saw from the fall to winter data in grades 1 through 8, we are seeing signs of potential significant growth from winter to spring for kindergarten students that are utilizing the MyPath online instruction. That is the component that gets turned on in the system once a diagnostic has been completed by a student. And so that also can provide some non-direct evidence of validity and reliability, that again, students that are using the program with fidelity, even as young as kindergarten students, are showing that improvement in achievement growth over time.
So
I just think that just to round it out, I think that so that's interesting to me. And I still think, again, getting at the heart of the matter, what is the value of having a diagnostic that is, that is comparable across the system, across our schools, across students in kindergarten? Because if we don't require this tonight, we still don't have one, as far as I could see.
So
I kind of agree. I think that there is a really strong value of having a consistent system across all grades. And if we make it optional in kindergarten, then it will be useful for the teachers that decide to use it, but it will not be useful for district analysis because it will not include every kid across the district. And it will not be useful therefore for longitudinal studies starting in kindergarten. And the fact that more kindergarten teachers thought it was useful than kindergarten teachers didn't like it. I think that and adding to that, the fact that we don't have an alternate assessment except perhaps WA Kids, which would definitely be a teacher's contract issue and could not be implemented this year. I would imagine it would be difficult to be implemented this year. I think the pluses of implementing it outweigh the possible difficulties that some kindergarten teachers might have in running the assessment.
So let me ask this. Is it better to have invalid data than no data? Which is really, I think, what I'm hearing people say here. Because to address the comments that Brandon made about validity, well, yes, I would expect growth from winter to spring of kindergartners if in the winter the kids had no clue at all of what they were doing and they were completely scoring in a basement. And then some of them figure out what they're going to do after they do a number of these lessons. Of course, you're going to see growth, but is that true growth of mathematical knowledge? No, because we don't really know what the actual skills and mathematical expertise was in the winter. All we know is they were hitting buttons. When we don't have validity, validity means that the test is measuring what it's supposed to measure. That's what validity is. So when other districts say they didn't have issues, they don't know if it was valid. They were saying logistical issues. And I do want to also just take exception to the phrasing of that in one of the reports that referred to the fact that those districts didn't report major issues was an indicator of effectiveness. That is not an indicator of effectiveness. That's just an indicator of they were able to make it work in a practical sense. So you want disaggregated data, it's going to be disaggregated data of garbage. I mean, it's garbage in, garbage out when a test is not valid. And so you're looking at the scores and pretending that they mean something when you don't know that they mean something, or that means something for half the kids who are the higher end kids and can figure this out. And it's not valid for the lower end kids who we really care about what's happening to them. So, I mean, let's focus on what we're talking about here. And the WA Kids has a math piece to it. Maybe if that's your concern, is to show growth, is to use the WA Kids and just have the teachers do math in winter and spring, which is a very small issue in terms of workload, instead of doing the entire assessment. There are ways, if that's what you're looking for. And in terms of reading, running records is a really authentic, accurate way to know how kids are doing in reading. And it used to be that the district had teachers report the running record levels of kids, so from kindergarten in the fall and on, so you could see their reading growth in the homeroom system. I don't know if you're still doing that, but it's an easy thing to get. And the teachers, that's not a workload issue because the teachers do that as a regular part of their instruction. So I just really want to keep reminding you what validity really means, and that to say, let's do it because then we'll have some data, is just saying you just want data, even if it's not meaningful. And if you just start looking at a consistent system starting in first grade and on, I don't know that our problems in math achievement can be traced to kindergarten. I doubt that they can. I think they can be traced to K through 2 if kids are then going on and they don't have place value, which is tons of research that shows that. But I just want to remind us what the difference between getting good data and getting lousy data.
Yeah. So I would just suggest we wrap it up a little. I don't think that's what was presented. I don't think I certainly am saying lousy data is better than nothing. In fact, that's what I was trying to get is there promise here? And that's for each of us to decide based on what's been presented.
Can I offer one additional comment, and I'll leave it at that. What is being lost in this conversation is actually the point that Dr. Kadams made about assessment literacy. And the way that we implemented it this year, where we had teachers having the option to use it, meant that some of the power of taking those data and having a conversation with your colleagues and really matching it in meaningful ways with what you're seeing in terms of classroom performance was lost, right? I actually don't advocate, if I had my druthers, we would do both, because any one data point isn't going to tell us everything we need to do about supporting the learners in our classrooms. And so, yes, we do, you know, if reading is the comparison, we certainly do the reporting on the running records. We revamped that whole system in the last couple of years so that we moved away from the variability. We used to have a system where teachers at the same grade level in the same school were using a different set of materials to administer a running record. Like, we had challenges there. So we worked to clean that up. That gives us some data about some things, and the classroom-based assessments, the ongoing formative assessments, and then add whatever iReady gives us adds more value. And if we can train teachers in ways to look at those data together and separately to make meaning, that's really going to help them guide their instruction for what's happening for kids day in and day out in the classroom, that's our goal. And so, you know, I just want to come back to that, because that's really an important piece. Because yeah, it's valuable to the system to be able to report things, but at the end of the day, it's got to be useful for the teachers. And I think iReady can be very useful, but it's even more useful if it's used in conjunction with other things that teachers are doing system-wide, or even at least consistently at a grade level.
Well, at the last board meeting, when we discussed this, I specifically asked to know what the feedback was from the school districts that were already using it in kindergarten. Because if they're already using it, I thought, well, okay, so what's their experience been? And so in the information provided, there were 4 districts currently that used it apparently this year. Everett's, it's some of the issues about how to do it are being bargained, but using it is going to be implemented next year in Everett, which is just the one to the north, is Vancouver, North Shore, Tacoma, and Kent. And Vancouver, no problems or issues specific to kindergarten. That comment was the data is seen as valuable and is used on a regular basis. North Shore, no problems or issues specific to kindergarten. And they noted that the data this year was unusual because it's a remote setting, but that pre-pandemic data was very valuable and used on a regular basis. So I don't know how much they used it pre-pandemic, but they obviously, at least for 1 year, pre-pandemic, used it and continued to use it during the pandemic. Tacoma, no problems or issues specific to kindergarten. They noted that the kids needed to be prepped for the test by watching the video, and something that it was helpful for them to use the learning games in the fall as a way to become familiar with the platform before they tested in the winter. And Kent said the only issue specific to kindergarten was that it's hard for those kids to log in, and that they found it best in Kent to have an educator in the classroom on the day of testing. So these specific comments were not just logistical. There were several of them that were specific to the data, whether it was useful, which is what the question that I asked. So, so it appears that in other districts, I'm assuming we're not different than other districts, that they have found ways to perhaps work around the issues that they've been having. And because they're still in use, they must have found some level of benefit in administering this test. And because school systems don't generally do stuff that doesn't have some sort of value. So when I look at these other districts, I'm seeing they've been using them, they find it valuable. And so I understand that our kindergarten teachers did kind of a 40-30 like it, don't like it split. But I really look at other districts to say, how is it working there? Because I just don't think, especially some of these districts, they're very comparable districts in number of kids, in demographics. And so I don't think Edmonds is such an outlier that that the opinion of these other districts would be completely useless.
So along those lines, I'm curious, Rob or Brandon, if you followed up with the two districts that chose not to use iReady, who use iReady but not in kindergarten, to find out why they made that decision and what they do instead.
No.
Yeah, it's Federal Way. Looks like Federal Way uses it 1 through 8.
And we've got access to that spreadsheet, I think, too, so we can see what other districts are doing. I just want to confirm too, when we're talking about who's using iReady, it's like we don't have information from iReady itself on the validity of this product in kindergarten. Is that correct?
For math, yeah, correct.
Yeah, just for right, and we are okay. Thank you, and we are considering adoption of iReady for our system, but just thinking about giving the option to use WaKids consistently in kindergarten also. I just want to bring back to where exactly what we're considering right now. We are saying that the amendment that we're discussing is making iReady optional in math for kindergartners, and we're currently using WaKids. So is that an accurate restatement of where we are?
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay.
That is.
We're using
I think
WaKids once, not for continued assessment across the year. We're only using
Right.
WaKids in the fall.
Okay. And so if we make an option of using iReady, then our staff would be tasked to think about options that would work to accommodate whatever implications are when we're making this optional in kindergarten. Just restating where we were. Okay. I'm concerned that we don't have information directly from the vendor on the validity of their test. I do know that it does seem to be being used successfully in a number of districts and not being used in a number of districts. And I am been very compelled by the discussion today that keeping it optional in kindergarten grades would be a solution to address many of the concerns that are being raised. One, we don't know the validity. Two, we will be getting an assessment across the whole system implemented tonight, just optional in kindergarten.
Well, that would mean we only have a first grade through ninth assessment that we can use longitudinally, because the kindergarten assessment would not have enough data would not be across the board, so it would not be district-wide data.
Well, I think trying to pull this together, yes, the potential to have the option in kindergarten is on the table. There are, frankly, there are pluses and minuses on both sides of that. It's not neutral. We would not have the systemic solution at this time. As Karen pointed out, we turn it back to the staff to figure out what the systemic solution should be. If in fact, I think maybe we're not necessarily even in agreement that it's a valuable in or not that it's valuable, that the amount of value that you would get with a systematic assessment in kindergarten that could be compared across the system. If there's not, I think we all know all the issues that so far are on the table. Are there any other issues before we go ahead and call the question?
Yeah, I just want to confirm. So we are going to be also looking in this next year at the dyslexia screener for K2, right? So we're going to be looking at some options for possibly considering iReady as a dyslexia screener. So there's going to be a lot of engagement in the younger grades with iReady. And so because we've made 2 amendments to this proposal thus far, right? With the recommendation dropping, well, on the screen that we're looking at right now, we would be dropping the entire last sentence. And I think that gives an opportunity for further engagement so that we can be talking with our kindergarten through 2nd grade on the implementation of iReady. And I am very concerned, I just want to reiterate that I am concerned that iReady, the vendor, is not giving us information on the validity of this test in kindergarten. And honestly, that gives me great pause in adopting something just because we want to get data across the board. We are going to be having it required starting in 1st grade. I'm very concerned with having kindergartners take a test that we don't yet have data on, that this is going to be useful information for them, the students, or for our system. And so, Deborah, I appreciate you assisting and the comments on wanting to wrap this up, but I just want to make sure that we go through every possible consideration before we make this adoption and the vote on this particular amendment. And so that's all I've got to add on that right now.
I had just one clarification question on the validity assessment. Does the iReady vendor provide the validity information, or is that validity information provided by another independent or a different entity?
Yeah, each company that they evaluated provided their own data.
But they did not provide data for K. So iReady, the iReady company did not provide data for K through 2 math. Is that correct?
That's the question that I'm trying to get clarity from AIR as to why there isn't the K through 2 data for math. It could be that it wasn't provided, but I haven't been able to verify that with them yet.
Okay, the reason I asked the question, I thought AIR and iReady were perhaps 2 different companies. They're not. It's the same entity.
Oh no, they're 2 different companies. AIR is a research agency that produces a website that where they collect and consolidate all the data from different types of diagnostic assessments so that folks can try to compare and contrast the different platforms on the same website.
Oh, okay. They're just a reporting company. They don't do the testing. They just consolidate a bunch of data
for this particular project, correct, but they're involved in all kinds of other stuff. They're actually one of the vendors that has been involved up until recently with the smarter balanced assessments.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
But bottom line is we don't have any information on kindergarten validity of this test, right?
The only information, we don't have formal evaluation, so we have basically, I would say, from teachers that have used it in these 4 comparison districts we're talking to, if there were issues that you could, I think a group of teachers can fairly well see if a test is grossly invalid, because they're doing assessments of kids all the time anyways. And so the fact that it's been used successfully in other districts would mean to me that it does not have a major validity problem.
Well, that's not an assumption I'm willing to make for all of our kindergartners when we don't have the data from iReady or the company that does the assessments. I mean, I hear you, Gary. I hear you, Gary, but
Gary, validity is a technical, it's a technical determination that's done. There are 4 different kinds of validity. You compare it to another, I mean, you can go through the 4 of them. None of them is just that teachers who've used it haven't found that it's invalid. That is not one of the forms of validity. And reliability is simply saying if you give the test more than once, the results that you would get on any student would be very similar from time to time. It wouldn't be like all over the board. These are both technical terms that are determined by researchers who are collecting the data and doing scientific research on it. It's not just a, I kind of think it's okay sort of thing.
Oh, I understand that, Nancy. I just believe strongly in the intelligence of teachers that are using things, and they certainly would recognize significant problems. They're not going to be able to evaluate the validity of anything because that's a scientific matter. But I believe that any talented teacher could recognize whether an assessment was actually working or not working.
Other comments, questions? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Well, one thing I'd like to say, and this is about the overall recommendation, is that I am hoping, and I'm sure everybody agrees with me on this, that the district will do a very comprehensive annual evaluation of this program year after year. It's very expensive. We're talking about $500,000 a year. That's a huge expense for something, and the evaluation needs to be carefully constructed to answer the most important questions about to what I mean, I'm not going to go into what needs to be in the questions, but let's just say there's an expectation that there be a strong, comprehensive, well-articulated evaluation annually on this assessment. And if it's really meeting if there's a benefit to the cost of it.
That's absolutely necessary for the cost, the investment, the amount of professional development that's needed to implement this. We have clear direction from Dr. Balderas that is a critical piece of it. This slide doesn't match the slide that we showed during our presentation, which had an asterisk at the bottom that actually included that piece. This is from what we submitted. So we made that adjustment to make sure that was an important part of the conversation. We're actually excited about that prospect. One of the selling points of this very early in the process was the predictive nature of the diagnostic in how students would do on the state standards-based assessments. We have not, in the 2 years of this pilot and project, been able to do that because we haven't given the SBAC in the system. And so, we're excited that there will actually be more data that we can bring into the evaluation conversation. And we're not doing our due diligence if we don't have a thorough report that's looking at all of those aspects.
Okay. Are we ready to vote? And perhaps Dr. Kadams, would you like to restate? I apologize, the amendment. I think just the math part, because I think the other part matches to what we're talking about with reading, right? I mean, it matches their recommendation. You're still muted.
Oh, okay, let me find it. Just give me half a second here. Here we go. Okay, so the amended version is iReady Math, support the advancement and growth of a data-informed school district culture and require the use of iReady Math diagnostic and online instruction in grades 1 through 8 and require the use of the iReady Math diagnostic in grade 9. Did you want me to also read the
Okay,
reading one?
no, I think the reading is the same, is it not?
No, there's one change in the reading. So the last sentence is dropped off, but it's continue to support the use of the iReady reading diagnostic and online instruction in grades K through 8 and maintain the current optional status in grades K through 8 in order to collect more data to inform a longer term recommendation moving forward. So that just changed, putting kindergarten back K through 8 to be an optional because of it not needing to be required as the dyslexia screen.
So my understanding is we've already voted to amend the iReady reading section. The current amendment only covers the math part, and that's what we would be voting on, which would be to change the grades K through 8 to say grades 1 through 8. Am I correct?
That's my understanding. So the amendment is to change from the change is that K would no longer be required. It would be optional for the math assessment. Okay. All those in favor, or no, I'm sorry, we'll do a roll call vote, please, on the amendment. If you are in favor of the amendment, please say aye when your name is called.
Director McMurray,
No.
Director Noble,
No.
Director Chase,
Yes.
Director Kadams,
Yes.
Director Kilgore,
No. And the motion fails, the amendment fails. And next we move on to, are there any more amendments to the adoption? Okay, now we are at the point where we would vote on the amended adoption of iReady as a diagnostic. Approval of, sorry, got a little tongue-tied.
I have some questions on this now, on the full adoption when you're ready.
Okay.
This is Ann, move to approve.
Okay, thank you.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt iReady as amended. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I've just got a question. We had a discussion just now about iReady and WaKids. So with this adoption, how does that impact the use of WaKids now? If we adopt this tonight?
Well, we still have a goal of revisiting the kindergarten report card. And, a longer term outcome could be finding a way to, utilize the WaKids assessment in a way that meets the same need with this. So I think that's, an area that we need to explore in terms of what the best way to move forward is. And that's really going to involve our kindergarten teachers and our building leaders to help us move that process forward.
So, but right now, WaKids will still be required.
It's a state requirement,
Right.
And there's no movement away from that. So the way that it would, if this proposal goes forward, the way that it will look for kindergartners is that they would take the WaKids assessment in the fall, all kindergartners. All kindergartners would take the iReady assessment in the winter, and then again in the spring.
And I still have concerns that we don't have any information from the vendor on the validity of this for kindergartners. So I will be voting no tonight on this adoption because of my serious concerns about how we're addressing this at kindergarten. However, I do appreciate all the work. This is not a reflection upon or a judgment on the work, which I very much appreciated, for us to get a system-wide assessment and to address the math needs in our district. So thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Thank you, board. I would like to go ahead now and call for a roll call vote, please, on the amended approval. Thanks.
Director McMurray,
Aye.
Director Noble,
Aye.
Director Chase,
No.
Director Kadams,
No.
Director Kilgore.
Aye. And the motion passes and iReady is approved. And we'll look forward to a report next year. Next, we have a second reading to adopt high school general chemistry and science materials as recommended. Do I hear a motion?
This is Ann, move to approve.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the high school general chemistry and science materials as recommended. Is there any discussion?
I am very pleased that we're going to be looking at this adoption. As you may or may not be aware, I have a bachelor's of science from the University of Washington, and having the up-to-date science curriculum across our system has been something that I've been looking forward to for quite a while. So thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'd like to call for a roll call vote, please.
Director McMurray,
Aye.
Director Noble,
Aye.
Director Chase,
Aye.
Director Kadams,
Aye.
Director Kilgore,
Aye, and the motion passes, and chemistry and science, the new chemistry and science materials are approved. Next, we have a second reading to adopt revised policy 5202, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration mandated drug and alcohol testing program. Do I hear a motion?
I move to approve.
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt revised policy 5202. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'd like to call for a roll call vote, please.
Director McMurray,
Aye.
Director Noble,
Aye.
Director Chase,
Aye. Excuse me, aye.
Director Kadams,
Aye.
Director Kilgore,
Aye, and the motion passes and the policy is approved. Now on to new business. Our first item is a single reading to approve the renewal of the agreement by and between the Foundation for Edmonds School District and Edmonds School District number 15. Is there a motion?
I move to approve this.
This is Ann, seconded.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the renewal of the agreement with the foundation. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a roll call vote, please.
Director McMurray,
Aye.
Director Noble,
Aye.
Director Chase,
Aye.
Director Kadams,
Aye.
Director Kilgore,
Aye, and the motion passes and the agreement is renewed. Next, we have a single reading to approve Resolution 21-25, intent to construct Spruce Elementary School Phase 2, addition and replacement. Is there a motion?
I so move.
This is Ann, seconded.
It's been moved and seconded to approve Resolution 21-25. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'd like to call for a roll call vote, please.
Director McMurray,
Aye.
Director Noble,
Aye.
Director Chase,
Aye.
Director Kadams,
Aye.
Director Kilgore,
Aye, and the motion passes and the resolution 21-25 is approved. Next, we have a single reading to approve the purchase of 5 school buses. Is there a motion?
This is Ann, move to approve.
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the purchase of 5 school buses. Is there any discussion?
Well, the only thing that would make me happier would if we were approving the purchase of 5 electric school buses, but that will come. It takes a little while to turn a big ship, and we will get there along with the support of our elected officials, such as Senator Patty Murray, who's brought this forward, and Marilyn Strickland, who's bringing this forward at a federal level. So I look forward to a cleaner, healthier environment for all of our students very soon.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a roll call vote, please.
Director McMurray,
Aye.
Director Noble,
Aye.
Director Chase,
Aye.
Director Kadams,
Aye.
Director Kilgore,
Aye, and the motion passes and the school buses will be purchased. Next, we have board member comments. I don't see any students. Can we have gallery view, please? Do I see any students on the call? No. Director Noble, how are you tonight?
Oh, I'm very good. All I have to say is this is the best time of year. That's why I'm on the school board, to see kids graduate. And I mean, that's the whole goal, is get them through our system and out the end and onto their careers. And I went to 2 of the graduations, but it's just so exciting to me to see the fruit of all our work in getting kids through the system. And it was just fun to see it. And these kids were legitimately really more excited than I've ever seen a graduating class before. I think it's the whole social aspect and getting together and finally graduating. It was really great. So that's my only comment. Thank you.
Director McMurray.
I'll just tag into what Gary said. As I sat through the graduations, I just thought about what an amazing year it was, and the graduation, be able to be there was really just a snapshot of what it took as a community. I mean, it was parents, it was grandparents, family, friends, community, students, staff, everyone working together to maneuver through this incredible year. And like Gary said, I just felt like the kids were they just seemed so appreciative. It wasn't something they necessarily took for granted, because they recognized that the class just right behind them or right before them had to do a drive-by on the sidewalk kind of thing. And I know we were trying to do our best, but to have all those kids back in the stadium with their support systems and the community there was just an absolutely wonderful thing. And so I just want to express my appreciation, and also express my appreciation for the content of the discussions tonight. We live in a very divisive world where people can get kind of off balance of where they are, and to be able to have a civil disagreement and discussion is, I think, something that needs to be modeled in our community. And I would have said that if it had gone the other way. So I just want to thank my fellow board members for the content of their discussion, and to thank Nancy personally for being so passionate and bringing to light your concerns, which have been communicated, and I know will make a difference in how things are implemented and how they are watched in the coming year especially. So thank you, Nancy.
Director Chase.
Thank you. And apologies if I was getting off camera there for a moment. The dog decided to like interject himself. And so when we come back into the fall, I won't be muting all the time so as not to subject you to a bunch of barking. And so that's an answer to that question. So yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that, Anne. I think one of the things that as directors and elected officials that we need to understand that, you know, we're not going to always agree, and having that dialogue where we're discussing the points and asking questions in a healthy way is exactly what we need to be modeling for everyone. And so I do look forward to the continued conversations about testing and assessments and such as we continue through all of our study sessions, and we can discuss this further, I'm sure, as we continue on. And speaking of continuing on, as a legislative rep, the legislative reps are meeting again this coming weekend, actually all day Friday and Saturday. A little bit of overlap with our leadership meeting, but we can make that work, to review and vote on the permanent and new positions that will be considered by WASDA at the General Assembly. There are 4 new positions, 9 amended and 40 returning. What's important about this work early is that these positions allow our WASDA representatives to advocate on our behalf by the permission we give them in these amendments and these positions that we're going to be considering this weekend. There's a whole lot of them. I will be happy to forward the full agenda if you're interested, because there are some really interesting discussions about the pros and cons of these, and I think you all might find them interesting. What is particularly heartening to me is also that WASDA uses an equity lens on every proposal we're looking at to see that if this will be negatively impacting any of our students in ways that we are not intended. And so that is coming up this Friday and Saturday. And I was very happy to attend graduations this last week also. And I'm very happy that, and always inspired by the student comments. And with that, I believe my report thus ends.
Thank you. Director Kadams.
I certainly appreciate the open discussion tonight. That's probably all I have to say about that. I'm excited that we have new science curriculum coming for the teachers and the kids. I'm excited that Spruce is going to have their groundbreaking tomorrow. That's a very exciting thing, and graduation was wonderful to attend.
Thank you. And I, like everyone else, just thoroughly enjoyed my time at the graduations that I attended. It's just the most wonderful time of the school year for me. I would just like to state for the public record that the board did give the annual review to our superintendent, Dr. Gustavo Balderas, and that will be entered into the public record. And then one more, I happened to sit in on a couple of the panels. The Secretary of Education was holding an equity summit today online, and I did listen in on some of the panels, and there was just, I mean, there were many wonderful things to be said, and many wonderful panelists, but one did sort of stand out for me because it's a concern that I've had, is understanding why people are opting not to come back next year. If they are, I don't know. It's not necessarily a safety concerns. I don't know what it is. So I know that Dr. Balderas is going to have his staff ask people why they're not coming back. But it's the reason it kind of comes to mind is because there is a rising incidence of homeschooling across the country. And one of the panelists I heard from is Baruti Kafele, a principal or a former principal from Newark, New Jersey, said, you know, that we have to ask hard questions. What is it about our schools, our programs, our staff, that parents are opting not to come here? Because that is the bottom line. When they choose to go elsewhere, that means they're choosing not to come to us. And so I hope that we'll learn more about why people opt out of Edmond School District, if in fact they have. Maybe they haven't, and maybe they just want to, or why they opt out of our classrooms. Is it simply because of COVID, or is there are there other issues that we should address? And with that, I am finished, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Balderas.
I'll be quick because of the lateness of the hour, and I just want to really thank the board as we have the last week of school here in front of us, and we have the last couple of days. And as been stated to the board, the graduations were absolutely phenomenal. I actually heard 2 Ferris Bueller quotes. The first time ever I've had 2 Ferris Bueller quotes and over the same different graduations. So it was again, looking forward to summer school beginning here very quickly, and also looking as we continue to plan for the fall. And we'll keep the board abreast regarding vaccinations, what we hear regarding any change in what we hear in vaccinations for our youngest learners, but also any changes through the Department of Health and Labor and Industry that will impact us in the fall. Again, that's what we're really keeping a keen eye on what's happening and the recommendations coming down. So I really appreciate the conversation tonight. Again, as I've always stated, we have our direction, we move on, and we continue to do the work to do the best we can for our kids. And I really do appreciate the board, directors, just your time and effort. I mean, people don't understand the time and effort. You don't get, you spend a lot of hours working on the board and providing direction. And I just really appreciate that, and the fact that, again, the guidance that you do provide. So thank you very much. And I will see the board this Thursday and Friday for quick training, and look forward to the work ahead. So thank you.
I don't believe we have any discussion topics, so I will just adjourn the meeting, and I'll see you all soon. Bye.
See you in a couple days.